Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto was sent to Final Fantasy. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by YagamiNguyen and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1, a Jinchuriki and Gaia. Consciousness returned to Naruto Uzumaki not with light, but pain. Excruciating pain as though thousands of needles were being mercilessly jabbed into every inch of his body, as if his insides had been submerged in a pool of searing acid. Every muscle and fiber of his being screamed in protest, reminding him just how close to death he had come. Naruto tried to force his eyes open, and the moment that he successfully did so, all that he saw was a smoky cloaked figure. Its gaze seemed to pierce into his soul as it hovered over him, and even with a blurry vision, Naruto could not help but notice that there was nothing under the hood, as if the ghostly figure before him was just a dark cloak that was given life. But then, his vision faded to black. The pain disappeared as quick as it seemed to have come, and the hooded figure was no more as Naruto felt a dull thud as his body slammed into solid ground after crashing through several wooden objects that were arranged into stacks. He was sure that he had passed out again because when he became aware once more, he could feel the softness of the bed beneath him, the gentle support of pillows cushioning his head. The sense of sterilized bandages and herbs rushed into his nostrils as he took what felt like his first breath, which made Naruto realize that he was in a medical clinic of some sort. "Doctor, I brought the herbs that you requested. Thank you, Aerith. You can leave them on my table." The voices of a man who was addressed as the doctor and a young woman echoed in his ears as he tried to use his other senses to survey his surroundings after finding himself unable to move a muscle of his body. His first thought was that he was held down by restraints, but after a few milliseconds Naruto discovered that he simply could not move. Even when he tried to lift his arm with every fiber of his being, a sharp pain that spread across his entire body shut down every other attempt that he had, forcing the blonde to remain still in his spot. "Aerith, can you go help me check on our new patient? I will mix these herbs to make medicine for him." Before Naruto could see if natural energy would help him, the request from the doctor to the girl who Naruto assumed was his assistant set his senses into high alert. He tensed as several thoughts on what he should do instinctively ran through his mind in less than a second, but most of them immediately got brushed away as he was swiftly reminded of his current condition. He wouldn't be able to crush a bug between his fingers, let alone restraining whoever that was about to check on him. Naruto just almost, felt bad for himself that one of the first thoughts that ran through his mind had been to just kill the girl. It was something that he wouldn't have thought of several years ago. In the end, Naruto decided to just do nothing. No one had made any hostile actions towards him, and he also couldn't sense any ill intent from the doctor and his assistants while listening closely to their footsteps as they walked around the clinic. It was obvious that they had been taking care of him. "I don't think he has a fever anymore, doctor." It wasn't long after Naruto had made his decision that he felt the back of small, dainty hand rest gently against his forehead. The touch was soft and warm, and the presence that loomed over him imbued with a subtle scent of flowers and femininity, filling him with a sense of peace, something that he had not known for a very long time. Still, he could also feel something else, a calming, yet strange energy that seemed to radiate from the assistant, forcing Naruto to slowly open his eyes and look at her for the first time. Their eyes met, and Naruto found himself gazing at a young woman who looked to be around his age, in her late teens to early 20s with light brown hair and large green eyes. The majority of her hair was pulled back in a thick plait with a large pink ribbon tied around it, leaving the rest to fall down her shoulders in long, voluminous curls and two front bangs to frame her face. Within the ribbon was a small white orb that seemed to be the originator of the strange source of energy that he was sensing. His first thought was that she was beautiful, in a down-to-earth kind of way. She wasn't wearing any makeup, nor did she seem to need them to look the way she was. If he didn't know any better, then he would have thought that she was an angel. Oh, the young woman, whose name was probably Aerith, made a soft gasp when she saw him looking up at her with tired eyes. Although Naruto knew she was probably surprised to see him awake, he could see that there was also something else, as if she saw something from him that she recognized, which Naruto had to wonder if it was a detail of his facial features because he was sure that they had never met before and he would definitely remember meeting a girl as beautiful as she was. "Hey there." The smile that Aerith had on her face lit up her face as she greeted him, her voice soft and melodic like a gentle breeze through the trees. Naruto felt a wave of relief wash over him at Aerith's friendly demeanor. He tried to speak, but his voice came out as a hoarse whisper, barely audible and was missed by Aerith as she stood up to make room for the doctor, who rushed to his bed and started to check on him. Naruto could barely remember the last time that he needed actual medical treatment. In fact, it was only then that Naruto began to wonder why whatever wounds that he had across his entire body had not started healing yet. "You gave them quite a fright when you landed in their playground, you know." "Oh my bad." Naruto spoke with a soft, amused chuckle, shifting his gaze away from the doctor to look at the group of children peering at him, mixture of curiosity and fascination from behind the front door. He had sensed their presence since earlier that morning, but this was the first time he acknowledged their presences. Seeing him looking at them, some of the children let out a loud eep and rushed off, making Naruto let out another chuckle as he found it somehow refreshing. It had been a while since he last saw children being able to just hang around and play with one another without a care in the world, after all. Well, you seem to be recovering fairly well, young man. Your injuries were severe, but I believe you'll be up and about in no time. Naruto nodded his head gratefully at the doctor as the man turned back around and returned to his desk, his mind still trying to put together all the fragments of knowledge that he had learned from eavesdropping people's conversation from outside the clinic. It had been a little over 2 days since he woke up for the first time, and Naruto still had no idea how he ended up in this unfamiliar place. As he stared out the window beside his bed, Naruto knew one thing for certain. He was no longer in Konoha. The massive metal structure towering hundreds of feet above him was a clear indication that he was nowhere near the elemental nations. From what Naruto had learned, he was in a city called Midgar, which was supposedly the capital of the entire world and the most technologically advanced construction that had ever been built on the planet, built by the Shinra Electric Power Company, who was also responsible for the massive metal plate above his head. Life in Midgar was divided up between two main layers: the paradise above and the miserable dirt below. The city itself was supported by massive pillars in each sector, and it was where the richest and most powerful men in the world lived. His current location, meanwhile, was in the slum below, specifically the slum of Sector 5. Unlike the city above them, the slums were home to bitter poverty. Even though he had not heard anyone complain about it yet, possibly because they had lived so long under such condition they forgot to do so, due to the size of the metal plate above them, the people of the slums could go their entire lives without ever once seeing the sky, making ends meet in whatever way that they could, having been forced to do so by Shinra in exchange for the electricity to power their electrical devices, generated by the 8 Mako reactors. It made Naruto sick in the stomach to know that some company would force people to live in such abject poverty while they themselves had everything that they wanted and proved it only to the rich. It reminded him of what he had seen in Nami no Kuni when it was under the rule of Gato. Regardless, Naruto could only conclude that he was in a whole new world different to his. How he got to Midgar was still a mystery to him, but it was still a hard and bitter pill to swallow no matter what. And also, what happened to Sasuke? Doctor, here are the ingredients that you requested. The feminine voice made Naruto turn his attention back inside the clinic, doing so just in time to see Aerith skipping in with a radiant smile on her face. Just like yesterday, she was carrying in her hand a woven basket full of flowers and herbs, which the doctor had been using to make medicines for him. Some were placed on his wounds every time his bandages were changed, others were mixed, grinded and boiled in water for him to drink. The medicine was extremely bitter, but he had had worse. Thank you, Aerith. The doctor thanked his part-time assistant with a grateful smile, making her beam at him before she finally turned her attention to Naruto. Their eyes once again met and the girl flashed him a beautiful smile before walking over to the blonde and taking her seat on the chair next to his bed. Hello Naruto. How are you feeling today? Finally, the girl asked, making Naruto look at her for a moment before answering. I am feeling better now. Thanks to you and your flowers. He said, glancing over to the flowers that the doctor was picking out from the basket to put in a grinder. It was only then that Naruto noticed there were some other ingredients being added into the mix, one of which looked like the claw of a feline creature, which Naruto had trouble telling which. Don't worry. It's perfectly safe to drink. Aerith assured him with a soft giggle after a quick glance toward the direction where he was looking, making Naruto turn his attention back to her. It's just never mind, the blonde found himself murmuring, just loud enough for Aerith to hear before he looked back out the window with a sigh. Someone like her would probably not understand. I know that you are not from around here. Naruto found himself looking at Aerith once more, realizing that they were the only two inside the clinic now. The doctor must have headed out to prepare his medicine, leaving them alone in his place. Like not from around here, Aerith continued, but Naruto did not need her to do that to confirm the meaning behind her word. He could only sit there and look at the young woman before him with newfound curiosity and wonder, and before you ask, I don't know where you are from either. I just know that you are not from here because the planet doesn't recognize you, but it likes how you feel. The planet? Naruto repeated, slowly and unsurely. Now she began to sound strange. Was it a saying around Midgar? Was she speaking implicitly? Aerith was definitely leaving him with more questions than answers, despite looking like she knew more than she looked. Gaia. This world is called Gaia. Aerith told him, making Naruto widen his eyes in surprise. It was quite obvious to him now that she was well aware of his current situation, or at least, knew something about it. Before Naruto could ask Aerith anything, the doctor made his way back inside, making them both look at him before back at each other. Smiling softly, Aerith then rose from her seat and turned on her heel to leave, though not before she had turned her head back to Naruto and speak to him with an assuring smile. "Focus on your recovery for now, Naruto. I will come visit you again tomorrow." And with that said, she left the clinic, bidding the doctor a warm farewell before heading outside. Judging by the passionate and loving greetings he could hear being directed at her from the people as she stepped outside, no doubt that she was the favorite girl of everyone in the slum, something that was no surprise to him, despite having only known Aerith for a couple of days, with each of their meetings lasting for only a few minutes. With a heavy sigh, Naruto fell back and let his body sink into the comfort of the bed, gazing blankly at the slightly worn white ceiling above him. His short conversation with Aerith had only added to his confusion, but one thing was certain, he was no longer in his own world. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. The Merc in the Making. You know, when I first brought you here, I wasn't sure if you would survive the night with the severity of your wounds, the doctor said, while scratching his chin in a thoughtful manner, with a look on his face, showing that he was just still trying to figure out an answer to all the questions that he was having in his mind, as Naruto knew he had been doing for the past couple of days, but here you are, completely healed after only 3 days. In all my years as a doctor, I've never seen anything like it. I healed fast. Naruto chuckled as he slipped his shirt back on, having just had his bandages removed for the final inspection by the doctor. While he was grateful that all his wounds had all healed completely, it still raised some lingering questions and concerns about the amount of time it had taken him to fully recover, as it normally took him only a few minutes to heal from wounds that would have been fatal to most people. Furthermore, Kurama had been unresponsive for the past few days. Naruto had made several attempts to communicate directly with his partner through his mindscape, but all he saw was complete darkness whenever he tried to go in there. Although slower than normal, if he hadn't healed so quickly, then Naruto would definitely have been even more worried. "Here, you can wear these. Yours were soaked in blonde and all torn up, unfortunately," the doctor said as he handed Naruto a fresh set of clothes, which was a pair of black running shoes, accompanying what appeared to be a simple black shirt and matching pants. They weren't anything that he wouldn't normally wear, but he always preferred to have at least a touch of orange on his clothing. "Thank you, doctor," Naruto said, nodding his head and smiling gratefully to the doctor before taking the set of clothes from him. "So I am good to go." "Yes. You have no reason to be here anymore. Normally, I would give you some medicines, but I don't think you need them, do you?" Naruto simply shook his head in response, though they were not the last of his inquiries. "And about the payment, you can worry about that later. You look like a resourceful guy. I have faith that you will find a way to pay me eventually," the doctor said with a chuckle, shaking his head and interrupting Naruto before the blonde could even finish asking his last question for the man. "Just don't run off forever, okay? I won't." A wide grin spread across his face as Naruto swiftly slid into his new clothing, finding them to be perfect in size before bidding the doctor a quick goodbye at his desk. There were no tall buildings in sight, only small houses, cottages, and crude structures like mobile homes and huts, showing the poor living conditions of the people in the slum. Still, the streets were bustling with activity, vendors selling their goods from their shops, children playing on the dusty roads near what looked to be an orphanage, and adults going about their daily businesses and hanging out at the local bar, which was just across the street from the clinic. Naruto also noticed several men stationed around the area, armed with what looked to be weapons ready to defend their home from dangers. As Naruto looked at the drawing of a giant yellow flower on the wall of the orphanage, the blonde knew what he had to do first. He needed to find out more about the world he had been transported to, and in order to do that, he would need to find Aerith Gainsborough, who disappointingly had not shown up to visit him the day before, leaving the questions he had planned to ask her unanswered. It wasn't like he had much of a choice in the matter, because the simple fact was, the girl could be his only source of information. After all, she was the only one who somehow knew seemingly right off the bat that he did not belong to her world. Although, looking for someone. Can't say that I'm not. Naruto gave his answer just as Aerith finished asking her question, having noticed her standing behind him with her back leaning against the wall of the clinic. He had initially assumed she worked as the doctor's assistant, but the man had revealed to him that she simply helped out at the clinic whenever she could in her free times, being the only person in the slum who could provide him with flowers and herbs that he could use to make medicines from. "You didn't come yesterday," Naruto then continued while glancing over his shoulder, his gaze following Aerith as she walked slowly up to his front with her hands folded behind her back. You sound disappointed." Aerith's teasing comment elicited a slight eye roll from Naruto, though he couldn't help but smile. He would be lying to himself if he said that he wasn't. The past 2 days Naruto was bored out of his mind, having no one to talk to and being plagued with questions which he might never get the answers to. The doctor would occasionally keep him company from his desk, but he was often busy tending to other patients' regular medical checkups, leaving Naruto alone for most of his time at the clinic. "I suppose I was just looking forward to hearing more about this world I've found myself in," Naruto replied with a shrug. I guess you have every reason to. Truthfully, if I didn't know any better I would think that you hit your head somewhere. Aerith said, making Naruto's sweat drop, not feeling entirely sure if she was being honest or just teasing him. Anyway, sorry for not coming yesterday. I was busy. No problem. Naruto replied, folding his arms across his chest before he noticed Aerith's gaze on him. It was the same look she had given Naruto when he first woke up, as if she recognized something about him. That's the second time you've looked at me like that. Is something wrong? He asked, genuinely intrigued. Your eyes. Aerith answered, making Naruto raise an eyebrow in wonder before she continued, they have the same glows of repressed power that members of Soldier have. Soldier? Super soldiers. They are the elite fighting force of Shinra, infused with Mako to have their physical prowess to extreme levels. Aerith answered him, are you sure that you are not a soldier? Well, I can confidently tell you that I am not. Naruto shook his head and answered firmly. Are you sure that you don't have amnesia? Memory loss could be a side effect of being infused with Mako. Naruto chuckled. Yes, Aerith. I did not have amnesia. I am also positive that I did not hit my head when I fell. Aerith giggled at his remark. If I had amnesia I would have just forgotten everything, but I have memories of where I was born and the things I did for the last 19 years of my life. It could have been a dream. Aerith suggested, though it was obvious from her tone that she didn't think it was the case. The girl probably was just trying to make sense of who he was. The memories that I have are far too clear to be dreams, Aerith. Naruto knew that for a fact, simply because he still had full control over his chakra. His wounds wouldn't have healed as fast if he didn't have Kurama's chakra, although it was quite worrying that he still had not heard a single word from the nine-tailed fox and had yet to find his way back to his mindscape. And you said it yourself. This planet didn't recognize me. What's with that anyway? Naruto asked, having been thinking about what she told him before that pretty much confirmed everything that he remembered was not some dreams or fake memories someone could have implanted in his mind. The latter was a possibility that Naruto had thought of before he started channeling his chakra to do some exercises earlier that morning to see if he was back at full strength. If I tell you I can hear its voice, will you believe me? Naruto could only stare blankly at Aerith in response because she didn't sound serious at all when she said it. Anyway, I guess I shouldn't push the subject anymore and accept that you are really from another world. Do you remember how you got here? Naruto decided to only shake his head in response, his shoulders sagging a little. Not knowing how he came to be in Gaia meant that it was next to impossible for him to find his way back home. There was no way to fix a problem if he didn't know the cause of it to begin with. Sensing his inner turmoil, Aerith reached out and took his hands, rubbing it comfortingly. I'm sorry, Naruto. It must be hard for you. Not knowing whether you'll ever be able to see your friends and family again. I wish I could do something to help, but, well, I'm sure that you would have already if you could, Aerith. Naruto grinned at her appreciatively, finding himself enjoying the way her soft hands were holding onto his. Plus, I honestly don't mind if I get stuck here forever. Of course, I'll take any opportunity to go back home if it arises, but if I can't then I won't dwell on it. A small, genuine smile graced Naruto's face, but Aerith couldn't shake the feeling that there was a reason why he didn't seem to mind being trapped forever in Gaia. His eyes held a sadness beneath their cheerful facade, and Aerith could tell that he had been through a lot. He must have experienced things that were far worse than anything she could possibly imagine. You know, maybe it's a good thing that you came here then. Aerith smiled softly. I mean, now that you are here, you can start over from scratch without having to worry about a thing. Right. I suppose you are right, Aerith. Naruto shrugged, giving Aerith a small smile as he closed his own hand around hers. Naruto didn't honestly know if he could really start over, but he was willing to give Gaia a try. Not that there was anything else for him to do beside trying to figure out his way back, but he had never been one to just give up, and he knew that his friends back at home would never forgive him if he did. That's the spirit. Aerith beamed before giving his hand a light tug. Now come on, I'll show you around Sector 5. Let's see if there's anything that piqued your interest. Naruto just smiled and let the girl drag him away, not seeing any harm in going for a tour with the excited and happy guide leading him, telling him everything she could about the slum and its people. It was also no surprise to Naruto when he discovered that Aerith was dearly loved by the people of the slum as they traveled from one place to another. Everyone greeted her like a member of their own family, their faces lighting up with just the sight of the girl, who would warmly return their gestures with a warm greeting and smile of her own. At the same time, however, Naruto also noticed that none of them seemed to like him, although the outright hostility mainly came from the young men, who were probably jealous that he was hanging out with Aerith and holding hands with her. Besides that, not that it was a big deal to him, since he had dealt with far worse growing up in Konoha, sensing only a distinct lack of trust coming from the residents of Sector 5. I don't think they like me very much, Naruto commented to Aerith, who had just stopped telling him about the grocery store that sold a variety of items. Oh? I wouldn't worry about it, Aerith told him with a smile, after seeing the looks people were giving Naruto. They're just not used to having outsiders around, that's all. We don't get too many new faces around here often, so when someone does show up people tend to get suspicious. Not to mention that you caused quite a ruckus when you landed in the children's secret playground. Everyone also thought you were from up there as well. Ah, gotcha. Naruto smiled. So Naruto, what do you do? Naruto blinked as he turned to Aerith. You mean like my job? Of course. He gave her a smile before answering. I'm a ninja. Ninja? Aerith pressed an index finger to her cheek and adopted a cute look of contemplation. Like the people from Wutai. You guys have ninjas in this world? Naruto asked, sounding genuinely interested. Well yes, but they are all from Wutai anyway. Aerith answered with a nod of her head, and no, I haven't met anything of them, but there are rumors of them all over Midgar, working secretly with an eco-terrorist insurgent group called Avalanche to take down Shinra, who they have been at war with for several years now, until the ceasefire ordered by Wutai. The war has been on indefinite hold since then. I see. Naruto nodded his head in understanding. That was certainly a useful piece of information. So, he opened his mouth to ask another question when Aerith suddenly eyed him a playful smile, causing him to stop mid-sentence. This is the part where you are going to ask me if I'm a ninja from Wutai, which I must have forgotten because I hit my head and lost my memories, aren't you? Naruto asked sarcastically while narrowing his eyes at Aerith, who just laughed softly at him in response. I heard it was a very hard fall. Letting out a chuckle, the blonde then waited till Aerith had stopped laughing to tell her, well you see, I am a ninja of Konoha, the village hidden in the leaves. Basically, what we do is that we would take on job requests from people who wanted our help, anything from simple chores like finding lost cats to assassinations of high-profile targets. You name it, we did it, for the right price. Ah, so you are basically a mercenary with a unique set of skills, am I right? Aerith asked, tapping her cheek in a thoughtful manner before turning fully to him to continue, her face lighting up. What do you think about starting off as a merc here? You know that doesn't sound like a bad idea to be honest. Naruto gave Aerith a small smile, making her beam at him in response. What about you, Aerith? What do you do besides helping out at the clinic? Well, Aerith's smile seemed to brighten up. Naruto could already tell that whatever job that she was about to tell him, she took great pride in it. I sell flowers. There you go. Welcome to my home, Naruto. Whoa. After traveling through a short tunnel on an old but sturdy wooden bridge, Aerith finally brought Naruto to a small land that left him awestruck. The scenery was nothing short of breathtaking, with vibrant green foliage and wildflowers dotting the ground, which was already an amazing sight on its own after Naruto had seen the condition that the slum was in. At the end of a curved rocky path stood a little wooden cottage with light red roof peeking out from behind lush foliage that surrounded it, framed by a collection of vibrant flower pots, bursting with blooming flowers of all shapes and colors. Waterfall cascaded down the side of a cliff, the sound of rushing water filling the air like a calming melody, while the crystal-clear stream meandered through the lush greenery that was gleaming beautiful in the pouring sunlight that was streaming through the gaps and unfinished parts of the giant metal plate above them. So this is where you got all those flowers for my medicines? Naruto asked while following Aerith toward her home, looking at all the colorful flowers that adorned the land around them. Even the large metal parts that seemed to have fallen from the plate around the area had vines crawling all over them. Most of them, yes. I have another place where I grow my flowers. Aerith answered with a beaming smile as she turned around and spread her arms out. These here are for the people of the slum and myself. I see you have a very beautiful home, Aerith. Naruto commented, feeling more at peace than he had ever been for a very long time in the place. Thank you, Naruto. Aerith smiled widened before she turned back around and beckoned for him to follow her. Come on. I will introduce you to my mother. But that said, Aerith led Naruto into her home, opening the door for him before heading ahead inside with the blonde following closely behind. I'm home. Aerith called as they walked into the kitchen, where Naruto noticed a woman dressed in a green dress and white apron, stood with her back turned to them in front of the kitchen counter, tending to a large pot of simmering stew. Its scent wafted through the air and made Naruto's stomach growl with hunger. Aerith, dear, you're home early. Hearing Aerith's voice, the woman turned around and smiled warmly at her daughter, who walked toward her with a beaming smile. Before she could say anything else to Aerith, the older woman noticed Naruto and stopped, looking at him with a frown on her face. Naruto, this is my mom, Elmira. Aerith introduced with a hand gesturing at her mother, who slightly turned to her, but didn't take her eyes off of him. Naruto couldn't help but feel that she was much more wary of him than the other people of the slum, and wondered if it was because he was hanging out with her daughter or there was something else. And this is Naruto. Aerith continued as he turned to him, doing the same hand gesture that she had done toward her mother, the talk of the slum. Oh, so you are the guy who fell into the children's playground? Elmira asked him with a small smile, making Naruto chuckle while scratching the back of his head, wondering if that was how the rest of the town knew him. Yes, Mrs. Gainsborough. Nice to meet you. Naruto smiled politely and reached his hand out toward Elmira, his head bowing a little in a friendly manner. As Elmira took his hand in hers and they shook hands, the blonde couldn't help but notice her gaze on his face, or specifically, his eyes, so he decided to clarify before she could make any wrong misunderstanding, figuring that no one in the slum liked Shinra and their elite soldiers. "Oh, I'm not a soldier, ma'am. My eyes have been like this since the day I was born." "I have to admit, you certainly have the eyes of one," Elmira said as she took her hand back, but Naruto could see that her demeanor had become more relaxed than before, making Naruto wonder if the Gainsboroughs had a history with Shinra and their soldier in particular. "Well then, it's almost time for lunch anyway. Would you like to stay and have Aerith?" Aerith. Elmira was cut off as the front door suddenly burst open and a young boy with a wooden sword on his back rushed in. His eyes widened in surprise at the sight of Naruto, but he quickly redirected his attention to Aerith, who lowered herself down to speak to him with concern. "What's wrong?" "The Toad King. The Toad King is back," the boy informed Aerith hurriedly. "We saw him wandering near our hideout again. Ernest and Rook tried to chase him off, but they got trapped and couldn't get away. Please, you gotta do something to help them." Aerith's face grew worried as she listened to the boy's words, her brows furrowed in concern. Without wasting a moment, she stood up and rushed over to the corner of the living room to grab a long metal staff, which had two glowing green orbs installed within the handguard around the handle, looking to be the same as the white orb that Aerith wore in her hair. Judging from the way that she was holding the staff in her hands, Naruto could tell that Aerith at least knew how to wield it, despite being far from an expert. Aerith. Elmira called out to her daughter slowly and cautiously, but the determined look on her face showed that she had already made up her mind. "I had to help the children, Mom." Aerith spoke to her mother before glancing over to Naruto, giving him a smile as she continued. "Plus, I won't be alone. Am I right? I will be happy to help," he said, smiling at Aerith before giving Elmira an assuring nod of his head, which unfortunately only made her look slightly less worried, though she no longer tried to stop her daughter, who then looked at the boy and told him while he was eyeing Naruto warily. "Sami, this is Naruto. He knows how to fight and can help us. You can trust him." "If you say so, Aerith." The boy nodded his head in response before he ran out of the house. "Follow me. Please be careful," Elmira called after the two as they rushed out of the house and chased after the boy, crossing the wooden bridge to head back out the main streets of the slum. Although Naruto had to slow himself down quite a lot so Aerith could keep up with him, the blonde couldn't help but notice that his new friend was surprisingly quick on her feet as the two of them ran side by side behind the boy, seemingly having little trouble running as fast as she could in that dress of hers. While she might not be an experienced fighter, it wouldn't come as a surprise to him at all if she turned out to know how to handle herself in a fight. "This way," Sami said as he led Naruto and Aerith to a small gap between buildings that were just across from the grocery store and headed in ahead of them. It was just big enough for a child, but not so much for an adult. "Well, this is a tight squeeze," Naruto said as he slipped himself into the gap, letting Aerith go on ahead while he followed right behind her. "I take that we are close to my landing spot." "Yes." Sami was among the kids who called for help when you fell into their playground. "Normally adults are not allowed in here," Aerith explained. "But you do. What can I say? I'm popular with children." Aerith giggled, making Naruto snort in response. That must be the reason why Sami ran to Aerith for help instead of going to any other adult in the slum. "And who is this Toad King that they mentioned?" Naruto decided to ask, doubting that it was one of the Toad summons who somehow got to this world with him. Eventually, he and Aerith were able to make their way out of the gap and arrived at a vacant area filled with toys and carton boxes scattered about before they continued to follow Sami as he darted through a small gate that seemed to open to another section of the slum. "I have not seen him myself, but he's a monster that has been wandering near their playground. The kids think he's some kind of toad royalty because he has a crown on his head," Aerith answered. "There he is." Sami called out to them in a low tone, making Aerith and Naruto rush behind a stack of carton boxes, which was just tall enough to hide both of them as they peeked their heads up to survey the area. In the center of a vacant lot next to a small river was a dozen of creatures that Naruto had never seen the like of before, and indeed they looked like toads that had learned to stand on their hind legs while having bloated stomachs, massive mouths with big fangs and large spikes producing from their backs. But while the normal ones were red in color, the Toad King was distinguishable from them by its blue scale and a much tougher appearance. And it was just as Aerith had told him, the monster wore a golden crown on the top of his head. It also had claw scars on its belly and appeared to lead the other toad-like monsters as they grouped up around what looked to be a collapsed hut where two children were being trapped inside. Other kids were standing on the cliffs overlooking the lot, trying to distract the monsters from their friends by throwing rocks at them, but most just completely missed their targets, while the rest barely flinched the monsters at all. "Well, that's the toad kind alright," Naruto commented while Aerith sighed in relief as the two trapped kids didn't look like they were hurt. Knowing what he needed to do, the blonde then turned his attention back to his new friend and asked her, "Aerith, you stay here and keep Sami safe. I will go rescue the kids." As Aerith quickly nodded her head in agreement, her hands gripping tightly at her staff, Naruto swiftly moved out from behind the boxes and dashed towards the collapsed hut where the two children were trapped. The monsters immediately noticed his presence and turned their attention towards him, letting out menacing croaks. Large fireballs began to form above their heads, but Naruto did not allow the monsters to finish charging up their attacks to make his move. Moving so fast that he disappeared from sight, the blonde then kicked the Toad King across his head and launched him across the lot with so much force that he went splash against a cliff across the nearby river. Dawn. Kamikaze. Wind release. Divine Wind. Before the crown that had been knocked off the Toad King's head hit the ground, Naruto had unleashed his technique, with his right hand forming a half-ram hand seal and his left swiping the space in front of him, generating a medium-sized hurricane that hurled away some of the other toad monsters. "Oh. Run as fast as you can to Aerith," Naruto shouted as he kicked off the door of the collapsed hut. The children inside were momentarily stunned by his arrival and the sudden tornado, but were quick to realize that Naruto was there to help, wasting no more time to scramble out and run toward safety as the other monsters struggled to regain their footing in the chaotic wind. Some of them tried to chase after the two running kids, but Naruto had immediately raised an earth to stop them and shield the kid from dangers until they had reached Aerith. "Oh no, you guys are not going anywhere," Naruto said as he swiped his hand over his head, causing the earth wall he had raised to extend and circle back down, forming a dome around the monster that had only a single opening. Grinning, the blonde then widened his stance and sucked in a shallow breath, building up chakra within his lung before blowing out of his mouth a large stream of fire into the dome that he had created, roasting the monsters inside quite literally. "Whoa." The kids standing on the cliff cheered excitedly for Naruto, who couldn't help but turn to them and grin, giving them a quick thumb-ups in response to their cheering, not missing the last remaining toad monster that came charging at him from behind. As Naruto spun around to take out the monster, he was abruptly halted by a shining white orb that expanded itself into a massive chunk of ice that fell directly on top of the monster, crushing it underneath its weight. Surprised, Naruto then snapped his head over to look at Aerith and saw her standing with her staff pointing forward, indicating clearly that she was the one who had conjured the ice orb and hurled it at the toad monster using her weapon. "Now that's new," Naruto murmured with impress before he walked back to Aerith, who smiled at the other children as they grouped up around her with their three friends. "Nice trick, Aerith. Thanks for the assist. Anytime. We make a good team, right?" The girl beamed before raising a hand with her palm facing toward him, making Naruto look at her for a second before finally realizing what she was trying to do, raising his own hand and tapping it lightly against hers in a high five. "You gotta tell me what was that later, though," Naruto said as he lowered his hand down before turning his attention over to the two kids who had been trapped inside the collapsed hut, asking them with a small smile, "Hey, you guys alright? Those monsters didn't hurt you, did they?" "No, we're fine. Thank you for saving us," the girl said gratefully before the boy quickly followed with a question to Naruto. "You're the guy who fell into our playground?" "Yeah, that's me," Naruto replied with a chuckle, crossing his arms over his chest as he looked at the group of children before him. "It seems you guys saved my life as well. So I guess now we are even. Everyone, this is Naruto Uzumaki." Aerith introduced them as she lowered herself down between the kids. "He's a friend of mine who is looking to become a mercenary, so if you and your friends have any problem that you think he can help you solve, feel free to come looking for him. I'm not going to work for free, but for you kids I think I can give a discount." Naruto nodded his head in confirmation and grinned, making the children look at him with a mix of excitement and admiration. Clearly they were impressed by his display of supernatural powers, although he could tell that it wasn't something so shocking. Whatever Aerith could do, it must be a relatively normal thing in Gaia. "Alright, everyone. Let's all get out of here," Aerith said and ushered the kids to leave the place with her and Naruto, which they did wholeheartedly. As the group headed back out together, the kids also showed Naruto the spot where he had landed, which was quite near to their playground. Judging from the crushed and destroyed carton boxes scattered on the ground around the area, it seemed he had landed on a very big stack, which must have slowed his fall down if he really had fallen from above. "We uses the boxes to play whack-a-box," Sami explained. "You can join us sometime if you want, Naruto." "Sure." Naruto nodded. Once they reached the main playground, the kids scattered out and played with one another as they usually did. Some continued to talk about what had happened with the Toad King, but soon their laughter echoed through the air as they went back to playing games with little care for the danger they had just faced. "Look, I know that you said we were even because we saved your life and all," Sami began before Naruto and Aerith could leave, making the two turn their heads back to look at him as he reached his hand into his pocket, "but I think you deserve some kind of payment for helping us getting rid of the Toad King and keep our hideout safe. Here." But that said, he took out from his pocket an orange orb and showed it to Naruto. "A materia?" Aerith asked in curiosity. "Materia?" Naruto repeated, looking over Aerith. "Yes, like these here." Aerith said as she raised her staff and pointed a finger at the two green orbs installed in the handles. They were smaller, and the energy irradiating from them felt less intense. It's thanks to them that I was able to use magic, like casting the ice spell from before. Ah, I see, Naruto said before he accepted the orange materia from Sami and tossed it around in his hand, having no idea how to use it but nonetheless approving its color. Although, the blonde couldn't help but feel a strange yet familiar pull coming from the orb. Where did you find it, Sami? Materia of unique colors like this is quite rare. Aerith explained, I don't think I have ever seen one that is orange before. I thought it was yours, Naruto. I actually found it yesterday near the place that Naruto fell when we came there to start cleaning up the place. Sami revealed, making both Aerith and Naruto widen their eyes in surprise. You can have it. Us kids are not allowed to play around with dangerous stuff like that anyway. Well, thank you then, Sami. Naruto nodded his head and gazed longingly at the materia in his hand. I can teach you how to use it later. Let's leave for now, Naruto. Naruto nodded his head to Aerith and took his leave with her, bidding the children a quick goodbye before they left together. That was exciting, wasn't it? Aerith asked with a small smile as she went ahead of him into the gap, with the blonde following a close distance behind with his hand still holding firmly at the orange materia. Yeah, and those kids are really tough. Most I know would have been pretty shaken up if they were almost eaten by monsters. Naruto answered with a soft chuckle. Kids have a way of bouncing back from scary situations faster than us adults, Aerith remarked, making Naruto chuckle and nod his head in agreement. And I gotta say, I think you will make a good merc. Not bad for a first job also. No way I'm considering that my first job. I was just doing a favor, that's all. Naruto reasoned, but nevertheless smiled. But hey, if the payment is involved, count me in for more. I really need to make some money soon to pay the doctor for his care, after all. Naruto grinned as he stepped into the street of the Sector 5 slum with Aerith, joining her as she headed home for lunch with her mother. Maybe Aerith was right. Maybe this was a new start for him. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3. Bodyguard, I'm glad to see you're all here, spoke Sang as he walked into the spacious room through the automatic door. He was a tall man, wearing a dark blue business suit. The sharp lines and creases of his clothing, along with the no-nonsense expression on his face, told everyone who met him that he was not a man to be crossed. He had black eyes, shoulder-length, black hair that was tied in a ponytail, and a tilak in the center of his forehead. Now that you are all present, we can get down to why this meeting was called. The other members of the organization that had previously been lounging around on the various couches and sofas spread across the special room reserved just for them all stood at attention as their leader walked into the room. The only one who had been standing was a young woman who, like the others, was dressed in the standard uniform of the organization, consisting of a black suit, a white dress shirt, a black tie, dress slacks, arched dress boots, and fingerless gloves. Although her silent nature may come across as cold, while her colleagues and superiors knew that she simply preferred to stay focused on the job, every employee in Shinra agreed that Suzume had the fact of an angel, with some even debating if she was the prettiest woman in Midgar, with a slightly heart-shaped face that held a youthful appearance, flawless lightly tanned skin, light brown eyes and reddish-brown hair that ran down to just below her shoulders in messy curls. It was hard to argue with their assessment. I was wondering why us three had been called in, boss. A man with spiky red hair commented from his spot on the couch, being the only one that had not risen from his seat that he was currently shared with his partner, a man with a completely bald head but well-trained figure. All will be answered in due time, Reno. Sang answered as he walked over to his desk and pressed a button on his laptop, turning on the massive screen on the far side of the wall, drawing the attention of the other three inside the room to it. There were a few seconds in which the screen remained blank, then it started to crackle for a moment before shifting into the image of Naruto and Aerith, walking side by side on the street of Sector 5 slums. The Ancient? Reno asked, acknowledging Aerith for the title that the special divisions of Shinra knew her for, although it wasn't long for him to turn his gaze to her companion. And who's the blondie? Is he her boyfriend or something? No one knows. His ID said he's from Com, but it could be fake information. He has recently settled down in the slums of Sector 5 and is believed to be living with the Ancient. Sang answered as he pressed a button and brought up the blonde's ID, displaying his information along with a portrait photo of him. Those eyes? Suzume pointed out while having the odd feeling she had seen him somewhere before. Is he an ex-soldier? We have records of a soldier candidate that looked like him, although he never made it and became a member of the infantry unit due to failing the psychological test. Whether that candidate and this man are the same person is yet to be confirmed. We cannot rule out the possibility that he has his name changed. Sang nodded before he continued, speaking in a firmer tone as he looked at his subordinates around the room, confirming Suzume's suspicion of him. Professor Ho-Ho has requested for the Ancient to be brought to him for her monthly medical evaluations. Well, here we go again, Reno said lazily as he leaned back into his seat. Sir, may I ask why you need all three of us this time? Usually just Reno or Root or myself is enough for the job. Cisne asks seriously, casting her gaze back to the blonde on the screen. Is it because of him? You're correct, Cisne. Tseng confirmed with a nod. It appears this mysterious individual here has been making quite a name for himself being a mercenary. According to the intelligence division, monster hunting is in his job description and it seems he's very good at it. It's best that we don't underestimate his ability and risk interference with our operation in securing the ancient. Reno and Rude, you two will handle him if he gets in the way. You're allowed to bring a unit of infantry with you. Tseng then continued, speaking to the two men on the couch before looking over to Cisne, who already knew what she needed to do. Cisne, you will take care of the ancient. I'm certain she will try to resist us again, so try to bring her in unharmed. Understood, sir. Cisne nodded her head at Tseng in response. This should be interesting. Reno made the comment as he folded his hands behind his head, looking quite uncaring despite what he said. I have sent everything that we know about him to your personal device, be sure to read it before going to the slums. You will leave later this afternoon. The leader of the Turks said as he took his seat behind his desk and pulled out several documents along with a pen, continuing to speak to Reno and Rude without needing to take his eyes off the paperwork that he was about to do. You two better get going. Hearing Tseng only referring to him and Rude, Reno poked his head up and saw that Cisne was already on her way out of the room, leaving him and his partner with no choice but to immediately get up and follow her, while Tseng just sighed. All done? Yeah. That should be everything. We can go collect my payment now. The sound of heavy machinery and clanking tools filled the air as Naruto accepted his payment from the satisfied client, who then bid him and Aerith goodbye as he left the construction site with the girl following a close distance behind him, waving her hand goodbye to the workers who all adored her, much like the other people of the slums. It had been just over a week and a half since Naruto had found himself on Gaia, and although he had adapted to the new world he had found himself in, not much had changed for the blonde. His life had been relatively peaceful, especially when compared to the previous one he had in the elemental nations. Naruto now worked as the mercenary of the slums, taking whatever jobs came his way from the mundane tasks like supply runs and manual labor, like what he had been doing that morning at the local construction site near the gate of Sector 5, for a modest payment of 500 gil, to the occasional monster hunts. Saving the children from the Toad King and its minions, a group of monsters that had been terrorizing not just their secret playground but many areas around the slums, had done wonder to his reputation. News of his heroic deeds spread around quickly, and many residents of the slums now welcomed Naruto as one of their own, seeking him out whenever they needed a specialist to help take care of their problems. So? Where to next? I have enough money to pay the medical bill that I still owe now. Let's head back to his clinic first. Naruto answered as he and Aerith stepped into the bustling streets of Sector 5 slums. The two of them had become such a familiar sight for the people that most would start wondering where the other was if the two of them were not together, which rarely ever happened. We should also find a place to have lunch as well. My mom won't let me hear the end of it if I don't make sure that you eat your lunch on time. Aerith pointed out with a playful smile, making Naruto chuckle softly. How Aerith managed to convince Elmira to allow him, a complete stranger who had literally appeared out of nowhere to her, to stay over at their home was still beyond him. During the first few days, he could tell that the woman was incredibly cautious and possibly even suspicious of him, more so than anyone else in the slums. Perhaps it was because she was worried about her daughter spending time with him, as any parent would, but whatever the case was, she had started to warm up to him after the first week passed by, and having him helped out around with the heavy chores and introduced to her the usefulness of bento lunchboxes. Although he had promised the woman he would move out as soon as he had saved up enough money to get himself a home to stay in, Naruto couldn't help but feel that Elmira had come to see him as part of their family already. It was also hard for him to think about moving out now that he had come to enjoy the warm and cozy feeling that he felt living with the Gainsborough in their house, especially after spending most his life living alone, with Aerith recently putting his name on the door of the guest bedroom where he had been staying in. The girl seemed to always have a way to make his new life in Gaia much more exciting and lively, and Naruto had yet to experience a dull moment with her around. How about we do it at the church then? Naruto suggested, making Aerith beam at him, nodding her head eagerly. Her long braid and sideband swayed with a movement as she skipped ahead of him, leading the way through the crowded streets, while Naruto followed closely behind her. After a couple of minutes of walking, the two finally reached the clinic of the slum, pushing the door open with the soft chime of the doorbell echoing through the air to head inside, where they found the doctor sitting behind his desk as usual, jotting notes on a clipboard. His face lit up with a smile when he heard the doorbell ringing and looked up to see Naruto and Aerith walking toward him, with the latter smiling brightly and waving her hand at him. "Hello, doctor." "Ah, Aerith, Naruto. Good to see you both," he responded in a cheery voice, setting down his clipboard and standing up to properly greet the two. "How are you today?" "We're doing great. Naruto here finally has enough money to pay you." she said as she gestured a hand to Naruto, who stepped forward and placed a small bag of gil on the desk. Despite making it seem like he had just earned enough money to pay the doctor for his medical bill, Naruto actually could have done so days ago, after clearing out the group of monsters in the courtyard behind the slums. However, the blonde had made the decision to save up a substantial fund first, as he didn't want to empty his wallet completely in one go, not when he had other expenses that he would need to attend to as well. And here I was worrying that you might have forgotten. Thanks, Naruto. I truly appreciate it. The doctor chuckled as he took the bag and put it away into the pocket of his coat. Smiling, the doctor then turned his attention over to Aerith and asked her, Aerith, would you be able to bring me some herbs for the medicine I am preparing for my patient? Of course, doctor. It would be my pleasure. Aerith said and walked with the doctor to his desk, where he brought out a note from his clipboard and started writing down the herbs and flowers that he needed. Staying back and waiting for him to finish, Naruto looked across the room and saw a figure draped in a blanket sleeping in the bed that he had occupied days ago when he first arrived, figuring it was the patient that the doctor needed to make the medicine for. Even from where he was standing, Naruto could see that the patient had sickly pale skin and hear him groaning quietly under his breath as he slept. Here you go, Aerith. I still have some left from the last batch, so there's no need for you to rush. The doctor said as he handed Aerith the note, making her nod at him before putting it away into the right pocket of her jacket. After that, Naruto joined his friend as she bid farewell to the doctor and made her way out of the clinic, giving the doctor a smile before heading out and closing the door behind him. Before he could suggest their destination, Aerith had already turned around and looked at him with a meaningful smile, making the blonde snort softly under his breath before a smile spread out across his face. Alright, let's go to the church and eat our lunch then. Yay. With that, Aerith turned around and ran off toward the gate, leaving Naruto to follow closely behind her. Eventually, the girl slowed down to walking, and the two journeyed together beyond the residential area of Sector 5 slums, crossing a junkyard filled with piles of garbage and twisted-looking metal structures. Remind Naruto of the junk heap in Konoha that he had been forced to go to in order to find his beat-up appliances. Soon, Naruto and Aerith arrived at the large structure that Aerith had taken him to a couple of days ago and told him was a church, a place where people go to for religious activities, or at least used to before it was completely abandoned. The roof was slanted and tiled, and the body was made of large sandstone bricks. The front door was a large set of wooden double doors with bronze handles that looked like it would collapse if he gave it a slightly hard push. Despite looking more or less like a ruin, the place certainly held a tranquil quality to it. Inside the church were several rows of wooden benches, most were in poor condition, and some were already broken. There were large columns on either side of the room, holding the roof up, while at the far end was a door, and in the center was a small patch of vibrant-looking flowers. Sunlight was streaming through a small hole in the roof, lighting up the flowers beautifully. Naruto had wondered how there could be any sunlight at all, with Shinra's giant plate blocking out the sun above them, but he had also learned to accept the effect that Aerith seemed to have with the nature around her. I gotta craft a table and some chairs if we keep coming back here to have lunch. Naruto said, making Aerith giggle in agreement before he brought out from the inner pocket of his jacket a scroll, which he had brought from the local grocery store in the slums and recraft into something similar to what he and the other ninjas normally used, and opened it to unseal 2 bento boxes and a pair of chopsticks, along with a spoon for Aerith, who watched closely before smiling in amazement. No matter how many times she had seen him doing it, Naruto never ceased to amaze her with what he could do, from storing items away inside his scroll for safekeeping and easy transporting, to manipulating elements in various forms without the need for materia. It confirmed that he was indeed from another world and prompted her to wonder if all ninjas from his world could do the same things that he could, or if it was something exclusive to him. So, do you have any job this afternoon? Aerith asked as she sat near the patch of flowers and enjoyed her lunch with Naruto, who sat in front of her and ate the food Zulmira had prepared for them using the chopsticks. I think I am done for the day. Unless a monster shows up, I will be free for the rest of the day. Naruto answered with a shrug before he suggested, looking over Aerith at the flowers on the ground behind her, would you like me to accompany you as you go sell these flowers? I'd love to, but you don't need. You are planning to go to Sector 7 today, right? The weapon shop that is making my weapons is also in Sector 7. I want to go check if they have finished my order yet. Naruto smiled at Aerith, stopping her before she could tell him that he didn't have to go with her. Plus, I think it would put your mother's mind at ease knowing I'm with you. Watching over you and making sure that nothing is gonna happen to you is the least that I can do to repay her kindness, and yours as well. When you put it that way, Aerith said, smiling softly at the blonde before she nodded her head to him, making Naruto grin at her in response before turning back to finish his food, pretty much inhaling the whole thing in less than a minute. Ulmira's cooking was just as amazing as ever. Still no luck? Aerith asked in interest as Naruto brought out from his jacket the orange materia and started to toss it up and down in his hand. She had recently taught him how to use materia, but while he had no problem using hers, the normal ones, succeeding after only a few tries, the orange materia remained unresponsive no matter what he did. Aerith had tried to see if she could use it herself, but gave up after she also failed. Yeah, feels like this thing is just a glowing rock at this point. Naruto said as he caught the materia in his hand and tried once more, even channeling a bit of chakra into it to see if that would work, but it was just as he had expected, nothing happened. The result was the same as always. Maybe the problem is that we don't know what it does. Could be. Naruto nodded his head in agreement and went back to tossing the materia, doing it a few more times, before putting it back in his pocket once Aerith had finished her lunch, handing her a handkerchief along with a bottle of water, before taking her box to seal it and his back into his scroll. Turning back to Aerith, he watched as she selected the flowers that she would sell for the day from the patch of flowers and picked each type by a dozen to neatly and delicately put them in her woven basket, handling each flower with great care. Ready? Yes. Let's go. Aerith said as she got up and nodded her head to Naruto, heading out of the church with him to make their way back to the residential area of the slums and take the train to Sector 7 slums, arriving at the station just in time to buy 2 tickets for themselves and get on the train just as it was about to leave. Since Sector 7 slums was only a sector away, the train ride to the area was swift and uneventful, with Naruto passing the passenger ID checkpoints without any problem, thanks to his new ID card, which he had gotten from the local authority in the slums after helping them out with some jobs and filling out a bunch of paperwork, registering himself as a traveler from Com who looked to settle down in Midgar as a mercenary. Due to the recent rumors of avalanches increased activities around the slums, Shinra had tightened up their security measures, scanning each person and making arrests without warning if anything suspicious was found. Having grown out of his careless elf years ago, Naruto was not foolish enough to travel around Midgar by trains without some appropriate papers on him, knowing that it would only draw unnecessary attention to him from Shinra and bring troubles to Aerith whenever they traveled together. Once they arrived at Sector 7 slums, Naruto and Aerith disembarked from the train and stepped into the small station. All slums within Midgar had a few shared characteristics, from the narrowed twisting streets to the old and rusty huts and buildings. The air was filled with a mix of various smells from food vendors cooking up their specialties to the metallic tang of machinery being worked on in the local shops. Despite the poverty evident in every corner, the atmosphere was just as lively as it was in Sector 5. Would you like to buy some flowers? All of them are only 1 gil each. Naruto smiled as Aerith began selling flowers the moment that she stepped out of the train with him, looking as enthusiastic as she had always been, moving from one person to another, talking with anyone who would give her the time of day, trying to convince them to buy her flowers. Some people did, some people didn't, and some just outright ignored her. But no matter what happened, Aerith kept carrying on with a smile on her face as she worked. Not too many were people buying from her, despite flowers being a rarity in Midgar, and she was selling each for only 1 gil. The job seemed to be something that the brunette greatly enjoyed, and sometimes, that alone was already more than enough. I'm done here. Aerith said as she walked up to Naruto and stopped a few feet in front of him with a smile on her face. So, where is this weapon shop that you mention? This way. Naruto answered with a gesture of his head to the side before he led Aerith out of the station and toward the innermost section of Sector 7 slums, stopping multiple times for Aerith to sell her flowers, which Naruto did not mind even the slightest bit. Eventually, the two arrived at a 2-story building with smoke coming out of the chimney on the rooftop. As they entered the building together, Aerith's attention was immediately drawn to the impressive collection of weapons on display. The assortment ranged from swords and spears of various sizes, their polished blades glistening in the light, to custom-made guns and crossbows that stood out from the mass-produced ones Shinra supplied their enforcers with. Although she had only been to a couple of weapon shops before, Aerith knew not many of them had a forge where the smoke was coming from and a shooting range where a group of customers were testing out their newly purchased weapons on dummy targets, filling it with holes as they laughed and cheered with one another. Those customers. Hey, old man. Naruto's call caused Aerith to turn back to him, watching her friend as he walked to the counter where the old man was standing, even though he didn't look that old. He appeared to be in his middle ages, with graying brown hair and dark brown eyes, with his attire consisting of a white tank top, leather jacket and green pants. Unlike the young and slender shopkeeper who sold weapons from his trailer in Sector 5 slums, this man looked like he could handle heavy weaponry. His rough hands and defined muscles showed the hours he had spent working at the forge. Oh, it's you again, Yamato acknowledged Naruto in annoyance, shaking a fist at the blonde. How many times do I have to tell you not to call me an old man? You can tell me as many times as you want, old man. Naruto shrugged with a small grin, making Yamato narrow his eyes at him before he turned to look at Aerith, his gaze casting from her to the basket of flowers in her hand. By the way, this is my friend, Aerith. Aerith, this is Yamato, the owner of this shop. Nice to meet you, Mr. Yamato. Aerith greeted Yamato in a friendly manner, earning an amused chuckle from the blacksmith. I can already tell your girlfriend has more manners than you, kid. Yamato said, making Aerith's cheeks dust a light pink hue. Fortunately for her, it went unnoticed by both men as Yamato pointed a finger at her basket of flowers and asked in a curious tone, are those real? Yes, they are real. Would you like to buy some? They are only 1 gil each. Aerith answered radiantly as she stepped forward and showed the blacksmith her wares, making him grin in response before bringing out some money to buy a bunch. Thank you so much. Don't mention it. It's been so long that I have seen real flowers. They remind me of home and life outside of Midgar. Yamato said as he put the flowers into a small cup and made his way over to the forge to fill it with some water from the bucket before returning to his seat to put the flowers on the counter. There. This should do for now. I will have to make a proper vase for it later. So, can I get a discount for my order? Naruto jokingly asked. For the lady, maybe, if she wants to buy a weapon. You, not a chance. Yamato replied nonchalantly, making Naruto snort in response, while Aerith just shook her head and waved her hand in front of her to politely refuse his offer, already feeling quite content with her staff. Alright, wait here. I will be right back with your stuff. Nodding, Yamato then turned around and made his way towards a back door where Naruto and Aerith figured he kept all of his orders. The two did as told and waited, chatting idly with each other before they heard the sounds of the door being opened again, although much more forcefully than normal, probably from Yamato kicking it open. Soon, the blacksmith made his return, carrying in his hand one large wooden box that looked to weigh a couple dozen pounds. Here, the first batch of order that you requested to be completed first. The blacksmith heaved as he set it down on the countertop. Naruto and Aerith watched as he took off the lid on the box, revealing hundreds of shuriken, their shiny metal surfaces, reflecting the yellow light of the room off each other. However, what drew Aerith's attention was an intricately crafted kunai that was laid in a separated section of the box, having 3 blades instead of just one like the weapons she had seen in documentaries about the Wutai War on television. In addition to its unique design, the handle of the kunai also had a single materia slot. I gotta give it you, kid. The schematic that you gave me to forge this kunai is incredibly detailed. I don't think I have crafted a kunai like this in my life. Yamato said as he carefully picked up the kunai and handed it to the blonde, who then gave it a few tests, feeling its weight and consistency while expertly wielding it in his hand. Judging by the look that Yamato had as he watched Naruto handling the blade, Aerith could tell that he was impressed by his skill. How did you come up with such a design? I didn't. My father used kunai like this. I simply wanted to pay some homage to the same technique that he used them with. Naruto said, before bringing out from his pocket the orange materia, moving it close to the slot near the handle. To his surprise, although not entirely unexpected, the materia shrank down until it fit perfectly into the slot. Naruto smiled as he inserted it and watched it enlarge to fit snugly inside perfect. Smiling, the blonde then showed the kunai with the materia to Aerith, who beamed at him in response. An orange materia, huh? That's my first time seeing one. Yamato smiled while scratching his chin thoughtfully. There was this kid from my hometown who really loved materia, especially the rare ones. It's been years since I last saw her though, but if she ever comes to Midgar, you better be careful because she will try to nick yours the moment she learns of its existence. If I ever run into her, I'd love to see her try. Naruto said with an amused laugh before he went back to the box and pulled out several of the shuriken to start testing them to see their quality. It was just as he had expected, each shuriken was very well made, sturdy and sharp, yet also weighted just right. These are perfect. Thank you so much, old man. Naruto said sincerely as he carefully packed the weapons back into the box. I'll be sure to put them to good use. Just be sure not to get caught by Shinra with those around. I'm more surprised that they let you live and sell these weapons here in Midgar. Naruto replied absently. Aren't you from Wutai or something? Yes, but it's been years since I last saw it. And also, believe it or not, some of their enforcers use Wutai weapons. A lot of their soldiers and instructors became adapted with their techniques during the war. Understanding your enemies and all that bullshit. Yamato replied with a shrug, making Naruto nod his head in understanding. I guess my crafts and my skills are still useful to them to a certain degree, so they let me off the hook until I decide to cross them. As long as you don't throw these weapons at Shinra and point your finger where you got them from, I will be fine. There are other Wutai blacksmiths in Midgar after all, but I'm the best. Bold of you to say, but don't worry, I'm not that kind of guy. Not to mention I won't get caught. Naruto said with a smile before he continued. I can't promise you I won't throw these at Shinra though. Alright then. Be sure to come back in 3 weeks for the rest. Yamato told Naruto before he decided to ask, watching the blonde in a mix of confusion and curiosity as he picked up the box and placed it on the floor, keeping only the kunai at his side. Do you need any help carrying that? I can get my assistant to. Don't worry sir. He got this covered. Aerith giggled and told him, making Yamato look at her strangely before the two of them watched as Naruto brought out his storage scroll and unrolled it. "Hey Aerith, I'm feeling a bit thirsty, so wanna go check out that bar over there?" Naruto asked, gesturing his thumb to the building that stood just across the street as he and Aerith exited the weapon shop together. Like most buildings in the slums, it appeared more or less a bungalow of brick and wood, cobbled together to create something vaguely resembling a building, but was still definitely the brightest one in Sector 7, easily noticeable with its lights and well taken care of the doorway. The building was 2 stories, with a large sign on the front of that blocky piece that had big "Have a Great Day" written in bold lettering on it. Below that was another curved sign that said 7th Heaven. "Don't you think that it's a bit too early for a drink?" Aerith smiled, making Naruto chuckle mirthfully in response. "Nah, I just want to check if they serve any non-alcoholic drink." The blonde answered with a shrug before he asked again, "You wanna come?" "My treat." "Aw, such a gentleman." Aerith giggled as the two of them went towards 7th Heaven and made their way in through the saloon-style doors. Aerith was the one who headed in first, with Naruto following her, though not before he stopped when he felt a ghostly presence behind him, making him turn around to look. However, when he couldn't see anyone but the same people on the streets, Naruto wondered if he was imagining things. But he could have sworn that he saw something akin to a trail of dark smoke disappearing behind a building on his left. "Naruto, you coming?" Aerith asked from inside the bar, making Naruto nod before entering. The inside was about what he would expect to see in a bar located in the slums. The floors were made of paneled wood and were slightly worn from use. There was a scattering of tables around the room with chairs placed around them, while dominating the entire section across from the door was a bar with several stools and a fridge and shelving behind it containing several bottles, jars and jugs of various alcohols and other drinks. The large sink and stove combo was located on the other side, hidden behind a small wall, and to his right was an old jukebox that was playing a melody and a pinball machine. Despite everything looking aged and worn, the room was surprisingly clean. To say that Naruto and Aerith were impressed would be an understatement. "Oh wow, this place is certainly a lot nicer than the bar back at home," Aerith commented as she and Naruto took their seats at the table near the jukebox. A minute later, a person came up to them and asked them, "What can I?" offered the young woman, but she stopped when Naruto turned around to look at her, blinking as he slightly leaned his head back and looked up. She looked to be in her early 20s, roughly the same as Aerith, and was an extremely beautiful woman with dark brown hair, which fell below her waist and was tied near the tips to form a distinctive dolphin tail split. Her eyes were what one would call a whiskey red colored with brown coloring. Her outfit was a white tank top over what looked to be a black sport bra that showed off nearly all her flat, well-toned stomach and a black miniskirt with a belt and suspenders. On her hands were a set of red and black gloves that extended up above her elbows, matching her red boots and black stockings. However, it wasn't her clothes or her eyes or even her beautiful face that attracted the most of Naruto's attention. No, that honor belonged to her amazing figure, which clearly meant more than just looks. He wouldn't be too surprised if she didn't have any guard at the bar, especially when she was beautiful and attractive as she was, because she simply didn't need one when she could do the job herself. But above all, she had a bust that could easily measure up with the likes of Samui or even Tsunade Senju back in the elemental nations. Without her sport bra, her cleavage would have been pretty much visible thanks to her several sizes to small top. Following the curvature of her waist, her body flared out into a set of wide hips that were perfectly proportioned with her breasts, which moved into a set of long, toned and athletic legs. "Hey, you okay?" he asked softly, getting the young woman to jolt in startlement at the sound of his voice, turning his gaze back to her face before she could notice he had been checking her out. Her face was quite pale, and her eyes remained widened as she looked at him, seemingly recognizing Naruto, even though he was certain he had never met her before, unless she had seen him crossing the street to Yamato's weapon shop the first time he was at Sector 7 slums. Which could only mean that she was mistaking him for someone. "See Cloud?" she asked, her voice a bit shaky yet hopeful. "Cloud?" Naruto repeated as he turned to look at Aerith, who also had the same confused look on her face as she looked between him and the bartender. It didn't take him long to realize that she had just spoken a name. Before he could say anything, Aerith had responded to the young woman in a soft, comforting voice. "I'm sorry, miss, but I think you have the wrong person. This is my friend, Naruto." Oh, the beautiful bartender looked rather disappointed at her words, but she was quick to pull herself back together, a feat that actually impressed Naruto greatly. Giving Naruto an apologetic smile, she then said, speaking to the blonde with a small smile on her face and her head lowering a little, "My apology, I mistook you for a friend of mine I have not seen in years. Don't worry about it. It's fine." Naruto shook his head and said with a smile. She gave him a bright smile and said, "Of course. Now, can I get you two something? Do you serve any non-alcoholic drink?" Naruto asked and the bartender nodded her head in response. "You can bring me anything that you have. I will just have a glass of water, please." Aerith raised her hand and told the bartender cheerily when she turned to her. Nodding her head to Aerith, the bartender then casted her gaze to the basket of flowers that the girl had put on the table and asked in surprise, "Are those real?" "Why yes." Aerith responded with a beaming smile on her face, "They are only 1 gil each. Would you like to buy some flowers, Miss Tifa?" "You can call me Tifa. It's been so long since I last saw real flowers." The bartender gave the brunette her name before she continued, smiling after checking out all the flowers that Aerith had. "Please wait here. I will be right back with your drink and the money to buy those flowers." But that said, Tifa walked back to the bar and got behind it, grabbing 2 glasses before setting them down on the countertop. Naruto remained interested in the bartender for a few more seconds before he started casting his gaze somewhere, checking out the slot machine and wondering if Tifa would let him try out his luck there. Though, the blonde couldn't help but notice that there seemed to be a strange line of dust around the machine, as if the spot it was standing on was a trapdoor or something similar. Ouch. Naruto winced slightly when Aerith suddenly reached her hand out and pinched his arm, making him turn to her and look at the brunette in confusion. "What? You were checking Tifa out, weren't you?" Aerith asked nonchalantly, and Naruto was also quick to deny it. "No, I was not." "Yes, you were." Naruto just rolled his eyes playfully when he saw the teasing smile that Aerith then had on her face as he continued the exchange with him, the two of them not having to wait too long for Tifa to return with their drinks and the money to buy the flowers. How Aerith noticed him checking out Tifa, even though he did it in like less than a second, was still beyond him. "Man, I'm actually starving," Naruto said as he walked out of the train with Aerith while holding his grumbling stomach with one hand. The two of them had just returned to the slums after spending about 2 hours at 7th Heaven, enjoying their time with the friendly bartender Tifa, who had become quick friends with Aerith. Her bar certainly also looked a whole lot livelier than it already was with all the remaining flowers that Aerith had, with the other guests even commenting about them when they came in. "Mom must be home waiting for us with dinner already. Let's get going," Aerith said as she walked up and grabbed his arm, dragging him out of the streets of Sector 5 slums while the sun slowly descended over the horizon. The blonde just laughed and walked with her. But before they could make it anywhere near home, they were stopped by a lithe-suited figure, with Aerith being the first to recognize them, while Naruto just gazed on in curiosity. "Sizne." The brunette addressed as the other young woman, Sizne, made a gesture of her head for them to follow her. Her expression was stern and headed toward the gate. Whatever that she wanted with them, it seemed she didn't want it to happen in public. "Aerith," Naruto said slowly as he looked at his friend. Her face was hidden from him by the sidebands of her hair, but the way she was gripping his arm told Naruto that she was no longer in her usual upbeat self. "Naruto, can I please have my staff?" she asked, and Naruto did not bother questioning why she wanted her weapon, bringing out his scroll and unrolling it in one smooth motion while it was still in the air to Aerith's staff, giving it to her before the two of them followed Sizne out of the town. It wasn't long before they reached the courtyard near an abandoned factory, where Naruto immediately realized that they were fully surrounded. "I hope you guys have a good reason for bothering us on our way home," Naruto said, an underlying threat in his words as he gazed fearlessly at all the barrels of guns pointing at him when Sizne stopped and turned around to look at them, standing between two suited men. One was a man who was adjusting the cuff of his suit, his all-business, no-nonsense aura was second only to the girl, while the other had a lanky physique, unkempt red hair terminating in a long ponytail, and 2 symmetrical red marks on his cheekbones. He was wearing goggles, pushed up onto his forehead, an unbuttoned suit jacket and an untucked dress shirt, giving him a lazy appearance, but Naruto didn't let that fool him, as he looked at the electromag rod he was tapping against his shoulder. "We have no reason to bother you," Reno said with a smirk, turning his gaze from Naruto to Aerith, who clenched her staff tightly in her hand. "However, we were hoping the young lady would accompany us back to Shinra headquarters." "Sorry, but Aerith and I are kind of in a hurry, maybe some other time, gentlemen," Naruto said in a tone as if he weren't talking to anyone of significant status, even though he could already tell that the group were Shinra. Having done some research on them from watching news and reading newspapers, he knew that the 3 suits were the members of the Turks, an intelligence agency engaging in reconnaissance and espionage, or even black ops, including kidnappings and assassinations, on behalf of the corporation. Not insignificant at all, that's for certain. "Well, you see, now that's just too bad," the redhead said. His demeanor showed that he clearly wanted the confrontation to go south because we were ordered to bring her. "Some people we work for just want to run some for medical evaluations on her. We will let your girlfriend return home after our professors poke her fingertip with a needle to get some blood for testing, that's all. Promise she won't even feel a thing." "You know that's not everything they wanted from me, Reno," Aerith said, and Naruto was actually surprised by the venom in her voice, having never heard her using that kind of tone before. "I will not come with you." "Well, there you have it, gentlemen," Naruto said as he slowly brought out his new kunai, which might not look not threatening at all to the Turks, considering the backup that they had and the skills that they possessed. "Aerith apparently doesn't want to come with you. How about we all call it the day and return to our home, huh? Before any of you guys get hurt here. Man, would you listen to this punk, rude? Said Reno as he pointed his electromag rod at Naruto. He flicked his wrist and the rod came to life, sparking with blue streaks of electricity as it was turned on. Looks like someone needs to teach you a lesson. A man of few words, Rude just grunted in response and took a stance, while Cisne slowly brought out a weapon that looked like a disc. But the flick of her wrist, the red, four-pointed blades extended out, forming a shuriken with a rather unique design, something that did not come unnoticed by Naruto. The only lesson that is gonna be taught here will be by me. Naruto stated, his eyes narrowing before he threw his kunai at Reno with a flick of the wrist. Seriously? The red-haired Turks asked mockingly as he blocked the weapon, causing sparks to fly when its blade came in contact with his electro rod with relative ease. Do you even? Before he could even react, Naruto had appeared above him in a flash of yellow, surprising even Aerith as he caught the kunai in his hand before kicking Reno in the side of his face with the sole of his left boot, sending him crashing face first into the ground, much to the shock of his colleagues, who was completely stunned. Rude was the first to recover, throwing a hook at Naruto while he was in the air, but the blonde simply flipped himself up after placing one hand on the man's surprisingly strong arm, using it to propel himself forward and kick the man across his face, sending him flying and crashing into the steel door of the abandoned factory. In a moment of panic, a soldier aimed his gun at Naruto and pulled the trigger. Quick as lightning, Naruto dodged a bullet by leaning his body to the side and deflecting it with his kunai. The sound of the metal projectile hitting the ground behind him stunned everyone whose eyes were on the blonde. Ceasefire. Ceasefire. Cisne roared as she held her arms out to stop the other soldiers before they could do anything stupid, having already raised their weapons and pointed them at Naruto, with Aerith standing directly in their line of fire. If even one stray bullet hit the ancient, you're done. Do you understand? But, ma'am, the ancient. As the captain of the infantry unit tried to reason with their superior, Naruto paused and casted his gaze momentarily back to Aerith, acknowledging that the title was indeed directed at her. Before he made any comment about it, Naruto quickly sidestepped, dodging an upward swing from Reno, who gritted his teeth while scrambling to get back to his feet. Naruto had to give it to the guy for his endurance and recovery speed. After all, he had kicked him pretty hard. Gotta make me work for it, huh? Reno asked as he came at Naruto like a storm, letting loose a barrage of swift attacks using his electro rod, varying from thrusts, horizontal swings at the torso to downward strikes to the head, and diagonal slash across the chest, never letting up on his attacks. His strikes were fast, even for a human, and his footwork was light, staying on the offensive while using his speed to take down his opponents quickly. His weapon crackled dangerously with arcs of electricity as he swung at Naruto, and the blonde knew better than to get hit by it. About time, partner. Naruto swiftly turned to the side and used the back of his hand to block a fist coming at him from the side, acknowledging that Rude had recovered and rejoined his partner. There was a dark bruise on the side of his face where Naruto had kicked him, and his lips was also bleeding, but the man kept a perfectly calm demeanor as he attacked Naruto with a series of punches and kicks, sensing his attack with Reno to overwhelm the blonde. Having noticed that he had broken his glasses when he kicked him, Naruto knew the man brought at least an extra pair. Naruto, don't hurt Cisne and Rude. Aerith shouted at him from the side, making Naruto glance at her, his hands and kunai perfectly blocking and deflecting the attacks coming at him from the two male Turks. They might not look like it, but they are good people. The fuck is that favoritism, princess? What did I ever do to you? You're rude. That's my partner. Reno shouted back, but he never lost focus in his attacks. That, however, did not stop him from getting punched in the face by Naruto, causing him to stumble back and leave Rude to engage the blonde alone, though only for a brief moment as Naruto caught his wrist and took a low stance to thrust the elbow of his other arm into his guts, sending him flying back with a cough of pain. Noticing only the faintest sound of something spinning through the air, Naruto did not waste any time to tilt his body back, letting the shuriken that belonged to Cisne, who realized she could not just stand there and watch from the side anymore, to sail past him with barely a centimeter to spare. Although Cisne had missed her attack just as she had thought, expecting no less from a man who could react fast enough to deflect bullets, her shuriken still accomplished its main purpose, creating an opening for Reno and Rude to throw their joint attack at the blonde. Only for him to disappear in a poof of smoke and reappear above them in a whirling of leaf. But that was the only thing that Reno could utter before he and Rude were both kicked in the face again in a swirling, spinning attack from Naruto, sending them crashing toward the metal junks that were lying all around the courtyard. Rude was able to stop himself before he crashed into a stack of boxes, but he was instantly sent flying away by a greenish tornado that was directed at him by Aerith, falling onto the rooftop of the abandoned factory, just as Naruto returned to the ground and spun around while simultaneously sidestepping the left, snatching Suzune's weapon out of the air in a feat that showed lightning-quick reflexes and perfect hand-to-eye coordination, his hand latching onto one of the handles on one of the 4 razor points that were protruding from the spoke when it made a full round and flew back at him. Suzune was too shocked to speak a single word as she stood there and watched as the blonde man examined her weapon. Never in her life had she ever seen it happen before. While she was sure that there were others who would be capable of such a feat, seeing it with her own eyes was still a shock. Nice shuriken. Don't think I have ever used one like this before. Naruto commented before he turned to Suzune and asked her, it's quite unique. Do you have a name for it? Suzune frowned as she tried to determine the best course of action. Seeing no other choice, she answered him. It's called Eureka. Eureka, huh? The blonde nodded and he tossed Suzune back her weapon with a grin here. Consider it my gratitude for stopping those fools from firing at Aerith. He gestured downwards with his fingers, causing Suzune to blink in surprise and turn around. What she saw left her completely stunned and more shocked than when the man effortlessly caught her weapon midair. The soldiers from the infantry unit were all writhing on the ground, their weapons broken, and they were whimpering in agony. When did they? Consider it a warning. The next time you even think about coming for my friend, remember that I am her bodyguard. Naruto said as he lowered his kunai down, standing protectively in front of Aerith as he said, you are lucky that Aerith likes you and Baldy up there, so I will give you guys a pass this time. Grab your friends and return to your home. Do not follow us. With that said, Naruto walked away with Aerith, not bothering to look back at the 3 Turks and their soldiers as they scrambled to their feet. At night, after dinner was over and the dishes had been cleaned, Naruto found himself sitting cross-legged with his hands resting on top of each other, palms facing up in a meditative pose. He was silent as he took in the peaceful surroundings near the waterfall next to Aerith's home. The natural energy flowing into him had a unique sensation that he had never experienced before, calming his mind and soothing his body strangely. Are you going to just stand back there all night? Naruto asked, making Aerith widen her eyes slightly. Smiling, Naruto then scooted himself over a bit and left a spot for Aerith to sit next to him. If you're going to be out here with me then at least sit down. Aerith smiled a bit before taking a seat next to him. As she sat down the young woman couldn't help but eye the blonde man beside her, asking him in a tone mixed with curiosity and surprise, how did you do it? What? Being so in tune with the planet. Aerith answered softly, I thought I was the only one who could do that. If you mean what I just did then it's a power that I learned from the toads of my world. Aerith just looked at him strangely, making Naruto chuckle softly before he continued, no, I'm serious. It's called Sage Mode, a state that allows me to be one with nature through balancing the natural energy that I take in with my own physical and spiritual energies. I highly doubt it's the same as anything you can do though. I see you gotta tell me how you ended up becoming students of toads later. Aerith nodded her head and said to him with a playful smile before she turned away and looked at all the flowers around them. You know I haven't thanked you for protecting me today. It was thanks to you that I didn't get taken back to that place. Hey, isn't that what the hero is supposed to do? Protect the princess, save the day and all that? Asked Naruto with a confident grin, making Aerith giggle lightly. Smiling at her, Naruto then sat there in silence with Aerith for a moment before he decided to ask, they are gonna come back for you again, aren't they? Yes. Usually it was just Rino, or Rude, or Suzune, but that was the first time they have sent all 3 of them. Aerith said. Must be because of me. Naruto answered and Aerith just shrugged her shoulders back at him in response, her hand reaching out and touching a flower gently. Aerith, I'll understand if you don't want to talk about it, but I was hoping you could shed some light on the real reason why those Turks were after you. Do you know that Turks keep an eye out for potential soldiers and stuff? Aerith asked, a playful smile on her face as she turned to look at him, looking as if she was hopeful and excited by the idea, maybe they think that I can be the greatest soldier yet. Aerith, Naruto said softly. He didn't want to force her to tell him, but he knew that the thought was weighing heavily on her mind. I'm sorry, Aerith murmured apologetically as she sat back down, scooping her knees up into her arms as she lowered her head. It's just, does it have something to do with the planet? Naruto inquired, remembering what Aerith had said to him on his first day in Gaia. You said the planet didn't recognize me, but it liked how I felt. Can you talk to Gaia or something? So far, he had not met a single person who spoke in the way that she did, so he had figured that it might just be her thing. Not to mention that she could also tell he was using Sage Mode and absorbing the natural energy around him, saying that she was in tune with the planet. Aerith was silent for an entire minute and Naruto simply sat there and waited for the girl to give him her answer, no matter what it might be. It's not talking like most people believe, like how you and I are doing at the moment. Aerith began, sighing a little. You see, I'm not exactly human, not like the other people here on Gaia. I'm what's known as a Cetra, or an ancient. End of chapter 3. Chapter 4. Life moves on. Yo, chef. Can I have another bowl, please? Seriously? Another? You sure can eat, kid. Coming right up. Naruto chuckled as he spun around in his seat, having just finished eating his fourth bowl of noodles from a street food vendor in Wall Market, a shopping center, and the foremost entertainment quarter of the Undercity located in Sector 6 slums. It was the closest thing to his beloved ramen that the blonde could find in Midgar, since about 2 weeks ago, Naruto had discovered that ramen did not exist in this world, much to his dismay. Thank you. Naruto smiled as he casted his lingering gaze back on Aerith, watching her as she continued to sell flowers near the busy crossroad just a few feet away from him. It had been a little close to a month since his arrival in Gaia, but not much had changed for him in that time. Aside from completing daily mercenary jobs to earn his living in the slums, the blonde spent his time accompanying Aerith wherever she went, refusing to leave her alone when she left her house, after taking it upon himself to watch over and protect the girl like a bodyguard. The night that they had been attacked by the Turks, Aerith had told him everything that she knew about her people, what little she was aware of at least, although it was still more than what he could find in planetology books that still had pieces of information about them. The Ancients, more often referred to as the Cetra, was one of the first civilizations of the Gaia, being believed to be the original stewards of the planet who had the power to communicate with it and was deeply spiritual in nature. It seemed that at some point, most of the Cetra died out, with Aerith claiming herself to be the last remaining Cetra on Gaia. Naruto wasn't sure if the claim was true or not, but he had chosen to believe her. The only other Cetra that she knew had long since returned to the planet, being none other than her late biological mother. Aerith had revealed to Naruto the same night that she was adopted, although the blonde had actually figured that out himself, after discovering that Elmira had no photo of her below the age of 7 in the house, which at first he didn't think much of. Regardless, the fact that Shinra was after her solidified her claim. If there had been anyone else, without a doubt they would have made a big fuss about it due to their relentless public pursuit of what was known as the Promised Land, a land of eternal happiness that Shinra saw only as a mine full of exploitable Mako energy for their reactors, a land that they believed only a Cetra could lead them to. Whether or not this land actually existed remained a mystery even to Aerith, but President Shinra and his closest subordinates seemed to think otherwise. Despite the fact that Elmira had struck a deal with Tseng, the leader of the Turks, that he would leave Aerith alone if she kept close watch of her adopted daughter and told them the location of the Promised Land, the moment that Aerith knew, the past 2 years Shinra had been sending a Turk to retrieve Aerith and bring her to Ho-Ho, the head of Shinra's science research division, who would then conduct medical evaluations on her to keep a close watch on her condition. They believed that as Aerith grew older, she would grow stronger spiritually and magically, and her connection with the planet would deepen, allowing her to eventually learn the whereabouts of the Promised Land. And so far, their theory had yet to be proven wrong. They were even right about her magical ability, as Aerith could use her materia at a level only a handful other people on the planet could. Her mastery over elemental materia was also exceptional, allowing her to cast spells with incredible destructive power, beyond that of even experienced users within Shinra. The past few years, she had also developed magic and abilities that were unique to her, using them to drive Shinra away and escape a number of times, although Naruto had a feeling the only reason she was left alone had been because Ho-Ho already had enough evaluations from watching her using those powers. But the times that she couldn't get away, Aerith would be taken back to Shinra's headquarters. She never went into detail about what happened during those evaluation sessions, but it had been Ho-Ho's cruel experiments that had weakened and led her mother to her death, the day that they could finally run away from Shinra after being held captive there for 7 long years. Just the thought of Aerith being treated as a test subject and having to endure the same treatments made his blood boil. That night, after seeing her to her room, Naruto had made a vow to himself that he would protect her and never allow Shinra to lay their hand on Aerith ever again. "So, are you gonna just stand there all day?" Naruto asked loudly as he picked up a piece of pebble on the ground and threw it at the door of a nearby building, making Suzume widen her eyes before cursing quietly under her breath, having no other choice but to remove herself from her hiding spot since her cover had been blown. "How long have you known?" she asked, her voice as cold and serious as it had been, while she kept the look on her face neutral, hiding her feeling well. Naruto had to give it to her. She would have made a talented kunoichi if she had been born in his world. "Since the moment we entered Wall Market," Naruto said as he received another bowl of noodles from the chef, who looked rather worried at the sight of Suzume. Everyone in Wall Market knew what that black tailored suit she was wearing meant, since the local crime lord of the area, who also ran the place, Don Corneo, was publicly known to work for feed information to Shinra. But the Turks being an intelligence agency, it would be obvious if they were the ones who actively dealt with the guy. "You're not the first cute stalker that I have, so don't be so surprised." Sisney choked as she blushed, not just at the compliment, but at the fact that this unknown man who had been protecting the ancient actually gave her one before he picked up his chopsticks and went on to casually slurp on his noodles, not noticing the way she reacted to his compliment. And you can also tell your unit to stand down. As long as you guys don't give me a reason, I will just sit here and enjoy this wonderful dish that reminds me a bit of home in peace. Naruto said as he gave Aerith, who had noticed what was going on and looked at him worriedly from the other side of the street, an assured smile, silently telling her that everything was still under control. It seemed to ease the nerves of the young woman somewhat and she went back to selling her flowers, albeit with a lot less enthusiasm, and she also kept glancing back at him. What unit? Sisney asked with a face that couldn't be more straight. How much gil are you willing to bet that I can kill the two men over there and over there with these chopsticks before they can even pull their triggers? Naruto asked, pointing his chopstick at the rooftops of the building behind his back and then the one on the left side of him, where two snipers were aiming their weapons at his head, although they were not the only ones that he had noticed. Sisney just stood there and looked at the man in silence, worrying that if she even dared to blink, he would defeat the infantry unit again like the last time. Sisney still had no idea how he did it. Was it some super speed attack? Did he use a special materia that they had no idea about? Did he have an invisible ally? There were so many questions about him that were still unanswered and it pissed her off. With just a small sigh to maintain her mask of a professional, Sisney reached for the communication device she wore on her collar and ordered the sniper unit. Stand down. Our cover has been blown. Lower your weapons and wait for my next order. One wrong move and we're all dead. Nope. They are all dead. You, on the other hand, I guess I will just send you back to your boss again. Naruto said casually before he lifted himself up, causing Sisney to become slightly alarmed. However, he simply moved to the other empty chair next to him and gestured to the one he had previously sit on. You've been standing all morning. Wanna come and sit down? I'm not tired. How about some noodles? I'm not hungry either. Man, you sure are cold. Naruto said with an amused grin, turning back momentarily to his food and slurping up another mouthful of noodles before asking. Then, how about, can you talk after you have swallowed your food? Sisney asked, dropping her professional look for the first time to speak to Naruto in slight disgust. However, when she saw him swallowing the food and then grinning knowingly at her, the red-haired woman found herself saying. You did that on purpose. Say who? Even Aerith told me I had bad table manners, you know. Naruto said innocently, making a tick mark appear on Sisney's forehead as her left eye twitched uncharacteristically. She could feel her patience slipping and it slipping fast. I take that you're back for Aerith again? Naruto asked as Sisney continued to refuse to move from where she was standing. Where are the other two guys by the way? What? You don't think I can get the job done myself? Sisney said, and not just the ancient, we have been ordered to bring you in as well. Try, more like. Naruto chuckled, although he was not surprised. Granted he had a little bit of help from Aerith, but how many people could defeat 3 Turks and a unit of Shinra infantry without even breaking a sweat? How many could dodge and deflect bullets with extreme precision using a kunai? How many non-Shinra personnel individuals in Midgar could use Wutai type weapons with such mastery? Obviously President Shinra would want to bring him in for questioning and Ho-Ho would want to have him on the table for dissection to learn all the secrets that he possessed. Naruto was more surprised that they took such a long time to come back and didn't send more. Unless, do you have your shuriken with you? Naruto asked suddenly before Sisney could open her mouth to say something else. What's its name again? Rekka. Not gonna crack a joke about my weapon? Sisney asked sarcastically as she brought out Rekka using her right hand. Not counting the number of times she had been insulted and addressed by soldiers before she achieved her position as a Turk for preferring a Wutai weapon, Sisney could think of 5 different ways to make fun of Rekka herself. I'm not that kind of guy. Plus, your shuriken is pretty neat. Naruto said as he put the empty bowl of noodles down before pointing his chopsticks at Sisney to continue. Open it after you have turned around and faced that wall over there. Your soldier won't get the wrong idea if you have your back to me. What are you trying to do? Just do it. Pretty please. Sisney just stared at the strange man, finding the grin on his face increasingly annoying. He could be quite serious, but whenever he acted more laid back, he reminded her so much of him that it was almost scary, always knowing exactly how to get on her nerves and crack a joke to break down her professional mask while she's at work. Sighing, Sisney decided to do what he told her to, turning around to face the empty wall behind her, though she continued to keep her eyes on him, glancing at the blonde from over her shoulder. With a flick of her wrist, Rekka opened up, spreading out with all 4 blades at the ready. Show me your throw. Sisney almost turned fully around to look at him. Just do it. Narrowing her eyes at the blonde, the red-haired Turk turned back and raised her shuriken, holding it on the left side of her head. Stop. Naruto suddenly said, and it was only then that Sisney realized he was standing right next to her. She almost jumped and immediately tried to leap back from him, but Naruto had grabbed her shuriken arm and pulled it to the side, making it so that she was holding Rekka on her left instead after adjusting her shoulder. Widen your stance a bit more. Like this. As he said that, he moved one foot up between her knees and spread them, making Suzume awkwardly move her legs out so she would not fall over worse toward him. Now, throw your shuriken at that wall. Do it with your whole body, not just your arm. Naruto then said as he stepped back and pointed a finger at the wall Suzume had been facing. Giving him a quick look, Suzume tilted her body back a little to build up some momentum before she shot forward and threw Rekka with all her strength. The shuriken spun through the air before embedding itself almost all the way through the wall with a loud thunk, leaving Suzume to stare at it in surprise and amazement. Not bad. It's a bit trickier to throw while moving, but you got the fundamentals down. Give it some practice and you will be even better. Naruto said as he looked at the shuriken in the wall before moving his hand slowly out in a neck chop towards Suzume, who instinctively leaned back while glancing at him. And consider having a sidearm. I'd recommend a short sword or a kunai, but whatever you feel most comfortable with. You leave yourself vulnerable after you throw away your weapon. I know leaving yourself seemingly defenseless is part of your boomerang trick, but it won't work all the time. Why are you telling me all that? Suzume asked while glancing suspiciously at Naruto, who smiled. Why not? You're really cute and you use shuriken like I do. Suzume felt her cheeks heat up and Aerith told me you looked after her whenever she was forced to stay overnight at Shinra headquarters. That alone is enough to make you kinda okay in my book. Kinda? You're still working for them. Naruto said with a gesture of his head at the giant structure of metal above them. As long as they continue to send you guys after Aerith, we will still be enemies. So, there's nothing that I can do to convince you to let me bring her back for maybe an evening, is there? Suzume asked, finding herself sighing a little. No. But you can tell your boss he can stop wasting both of our time. I will not allow that ho-ho man to be anywhere near Aerith ever again. Naruto said simply, making Suzume glance over to him before she saw Aerith standing at the crossroad looking at them. Oh well, I guess that's my cue to leave. It was nice talking to you. As he said that, Naruto strolled over to the noodle vendor and settled his bill with the chef before turning his attention back to Aerith and waving his hand at her with a grin. The brunette returned his smile and waved back, at the same time acknowledging Suzume with a nod when she caught her eye. Until next time, Suzume. Suzume watched as Naruto walked away, his hand waving at her above his head as he went. She almost said goodbye in return, her lips already parting slightly to mouth a word, but she stopped herself before she could do so, despite feeling a strange appeal at the idea. Still, the red-haired Turk remained standing there and kept her eyes on the mysterious blonde, waiting for him to reach Aerith to walk over to her weapon and yank the wall hard. As Suzume looked at Rekka, she couldn't help but recall his instructions on how to better use the weapon and how his hands had gently adjusted her arm as he corrected her posture, causing her to blush a little. Bang it, Suzume groaned in frustration as she shut her eyes and ruffled furiously at her hair. She hated how much of a complete mess her feelings were. Is everything alright? Aerith asked in concern once Naruto had gotten to her. Better than ever. Naruto answered as he flashed Aerith a grin. I just learned from Suzume that Shinra is now after me too. Guess we have something in common now. Shouldn't you be worried? The Cetra asked as she walked with Naruto out of Wall Market, heading toward the northern exit to start making their way home in Sector 5 slums. Nah, not really. Naruto answered with an amused chuckle before he asked, say, do you always come to Wall Market on this day of the month? Yes. Why do you ask? Suzume was here before we did. She must have studied your traveling pattern and set up an ambush with the hope to catch you without me around, or at least at the moment I lowered my guard. Naruto nodded. We can't rule out the possibility that the other Turks also know of it, so maybe you should think about altering your destinations randomly from now on. That would be too bad. Aerith answered with her shoulders slumping in disappointment. Some of my regular customers always expect me to come by and buy lots of flowers on the days that I go to their sectors. Well, I guess that would certainly be a problem then, Naruto said as he rubbed his chin thoughtfully. It's alright. I honestly don't think it will be a problem. Aerith shrugged while smiling at the blonde, who returned it. Hey, maybe tomorrow we can head back to Sector 7 slums and see Tifa. That, we have had enough of you, Madam M. Before Naruto could answer, a voice caused both Aerith and Naruto to look over to a building near the exit of Wall Market, seeing a group of men grouping up in front of a woman who had a slender yet incredibly attractive physique. She had light skin, black hair pinned up with elaborate golden hairpins, dark brown eyes, and sported purple eyeshadow and red lipstick. Her outfit was a black kimono with a golden flower pattern secured by a patterned orange obi tied in the front. Her right shoulder was left bare, revealing the bandage that she wore over her large breasts underneath. In addition, she also wore a pair of black Jetta sandals and carried in her hand a fan that matches her kimono. Do you already forget who I am? I suggest you gentlemen leave me be or there will be trouble. the woman said in a voice that was both chilling yet soft, waving her fan at her as she stood fearlessly in front of the group of men with one hand on her hip. One of the men standing at the front laughed arrogantly as he took a step closer to her. "Oh, there will be trouble, alright. Trouble for you. Hey. Leave her alone." Aerith shouted as she rushed forward. "Why don't you pick on someone your own size?" "Huh?" One of the thugs expressed his confusion with a simple huh. As they all turned to face Aerith, who instinctively took a step back as each thug was much larger and more intimidating than she had made them out to be from behind. "Hey, guys. Take a look at girlie over here. You want to mess with us?" The lead thug asked as he brought out from behind him a bat. "Hey boss, don't you think that she's rather pretty?" A masked thug asked excitedly as he rushed up to the boss, causing the others to agree with him before he looked at Aerith and continued, "Hey girl, wanna ditch your boyfriend and come hang out with real men? And what's with all those flowers? You trying to smell nice for us, or something?" The group of thugs roared in laughter, while Aerith just clenched her fists and glared at them. "Here you go, Milady." Naruto chuckled as he walked up to Aerith and handed the girl her staff. "I can hold onto the flowers for you, if you want." And now she has a staff with her. "What are you gonna do with that? You gonna give us a little twirl?" Before the leader could finish, Aerith had thrust her staff right at his face, in a move that Naruto had taught her. With a loud crunch, she knocked a tooth off and sent the thug tumbling to the ground, while the rest of his gang stood there and watched a sudden turn of events in stunned silence. "Well?" Aerith asked as she drew her staff back and held it ready at her side. "At that bitch." Recovering, the other thugs did as the command of their angered leader, who whimpered on the ground and lunged towards Aerith with menacing cries. But before they could reach her, Naruto swiftly stepped in and kicked the closest one to her away while holding Aerith's basket of flowers above his head, sending him flying before crashing into nearby trash cans. Another thug rushed at Aerith with a knife, but Naruto had pulled out his kunai and threw it at the weapon, effectively disarming him by knocking it out of his hand and allowing Aerith to thrust her staffs into his guts, using his own momentum against him and sending him tumbling back while holding his stomach in pain. Together, the two swiftly took care of the remaining thugs, with Naruto making sure that none of them would be able to reach Aerith so she could freely practice the moves he had been teaching her to defend herself without having to rely on her materia and magic all the time to defend herself. Not that Naruto would ever allow a situation where she would have to defend herself alone, however. "Damn you." At last, with the rest of his gang on the ground whimpering in pain, the recovered leader ran at them with a club and Naruto was fully ready to deal with the guy. The blonde was stopped, however, not by any of the other thugs, but from seeing his own breath, noticing the sudden drop in temperature around him before he saw a layer of ice spread rapidly on the ground toward the thug. Not noticing it, he slipped, his body almost a horizontal line as his feet swung up into the air before he fell down hard on his back with a cry of pain. Tracing the trail of ice back to its source after realizing that it was not Aerith who had caused it, Naruto finally landed his gaze on Madame M, who was standing with her fan on a spot of the wall next to her, a sneer etching across her face as she slowly lowered her hand down and left behind a bluish trail of ice from the tip of her fan, which seemed to cause the ice there to thicken. Lowering the fan to her hips, the woman then walked elegantly toward the leader of the thug with impeccable balance on the frozen ground and did something that stunned both Naruto and Aerith. She kicked the thug in the stomach in the most thuggish way they had seen. "Get the fuck off my establishment, you thugs." The woman yelled as they scrambled to their feet and ran away in fear while crying in terror, "If I ever see your face around here again, I swear I will have you all dragged into the middle of the town and publicly shot, you hear me?" Now clearing her throat, the woman elegantly turned her attention over to Naruto and Aerith and hummed while matching toward them, her voice soft and smooth as silk. "What can I do for you lovebirds? The lovebirds." Aerith stuttered, while Naruto couldn't say anything when Madame M suddenly put her fan against his chin and tilted his head back. "What are you?" Naruto asked as he leaned his head away, earning himself a warning tap on the shoulder from the woman as she gave him a hard look that clearly told him to be still. Furrowing his eyebrows, the blonde watched as she began to trace her fan down his shoulder and then his arm before eventually stopping at his hand, which was holding onto his tri-pronged kunai. The orange materia glinted as she tilted her head and gave it a studious look before she turned her gaze back to him. "Well, you certainly have the firm, strong body of a warrior." Madame M said as she took her fan back and gestured to her establishment. "How about coming into my parlor for a massage session? For helping me, it's on the house." Yeah. Thanks, but I think I'll pass." Naruto chuckled and said, waving his hands in front of him to decline the offer. "Yes, we didn't do it to gain anything from you, ma'am." Aerith joined him and spoke to Madame M, who just gave her a quick, unimpressed glance. For some reason, both of them couldn't help but feel that there was something off about the woman. "Oh, that's just too bad then," the woman said, despite not sounding at all disappointed. "How about I tell you a little secret about that materia of yours?" "You mean this?" Naruto asked, holding up his kunai to show the orange materia, which he still had no luck in using. Having trouble using it, yes? She asked, making Naruto nod in response. Have you not been hearing anything from a friend of yours recently? Naruto could only widen his eyes in realization at that. Well then, if there's nothing else, I will return to my business now. With a smile and a gesture of her head, Madame M turned around and began to walk back to her establishment. Appreciate the help, but keep your nose out of trouble, kiddos. Especially you, Plain Jane. The Plain Jane. Wait. How do you know about Ku? Before either Naruto or Aerith could get another response from her, the woman had already slammed the door of her establishment shut, leaving the two to stand there and stare at it in surprise. After a moment, Naruto finally broke the silence and turned over to speak to Aerith. Well, she's certainly quite the character. He said with a soft, amused laugh, making Aerith nod her head slowly in agreement. Come on, let's get out of here, Naruto urged. They got a train to catch. And something for him to try out. Oh hey, isn't that Tifa? Aerith asked suddenly before walking ahead of Naruto and calling out while waving her hand excitedly above her head. Tifa. Tifa. Over here. Tifa turned around when she heard her name being called, her face lighting up with recognition when she saw Aerith waving at her while walking with Naruto through the main gate of Sector 5 slums, having just gotten off the train that took them back from Wall Market. It's so good to see you, Tifa. Aerith said as she brought Tifa in for a warm embrace, making the black-haired girl beam as she returned the gesture. It had been 2 weeks since they last saw Tifa, but it was quite clear that the few hours that he and Aerith had spent at 7th Heaven was enough to make Aerith and Tifa good friends. Hey Tifa. Naruto grinned as he waved a hand at the girl. What are you doing here in Sector 5? How have you been? I have been doing well. Thank you. Tifa's smile widened as she answered him. What about you two? Have you been taking care of Aerith, Naruto? Oh, you have no idea. Naruto said, making Aerith giggle softly into her hand while Tifa just glanced between the two, feeling that there was more to his answer than the fact that Naruto and Aerith felt awfully close, much closer than they had been when they came into her bar for a drink. Tifa, what are you doing here in Sector 5? Aerith asked, making Tifa turn her attention back to her. I actually came here looking for you, Aerith. Tifa answered, making Aerith and Naruto look at her in curiosity. The flowers that I bought from you last time, my customers really love them. They really make the place feel livelier, more alive. I have also been taking care of them at the bar, but I am hoping I can buy some more from you to decorate 7th Heaven. With a gasp of excitement and a beaming smile brighter than the sunlight filtering through the unfinished portion of the plate, Aerith exclaimed, oh, I would love to, Tifa. Come, let me show you where I grow them. You can choose as many flowers as you want there. But that said, the brunette wasted no time to grab her friend by her hand and pull her along with her, making Tifa smile as she followed Aerith to her home with Naruto following a close distance behind the two. Yo, big bro Naruto. Hey Lar. You guys be careful up there, alright. Naruto heard a familiar voice call out to him and looked up to see Lar on the rooftop of a nearby hut with a small group of other children from the Leaf House orphanage whom had started to look up to him like a big brother. Whenever they didn't have anything to do, like running errands for Elmira, Naruto and Aerith would hang out and play games with them at their playground, which had been improved after he had brought in some construction materials that he found at a nearby junkyard and built up the place to make it feel like an actual secret base. Don't worry, big bro. You know us. The kids quickly vanish, leaving Naruto to catch up with Aerith and Tifa as they ran into the tunnel that led to Aerith's home and the flower field surrounding it, a sight that never failed to amaze Naruto, no matter how many times he had seen it. Unexpectedly, Tifa had a similar reaction to him the first time he saw it. Oh wow, the black-haired woman uttered in astonishment as she stood in place and took in everything around her. It had been so long since she had seen such a display of pure serenity, a scene that one could never expect to see in Midgar. I thought you grew your flowers in pots, but how is this place possible? Most of Midgar was a barren wasteland because of the reactors. And yet, I have something of a green thumb. Aerith winked as she walked ahead of Tifa, who could only nod her head as she followed her toward her home with Naruto, who rushed up to Naruto to open the door for both girls, waiting for them both to come in before he then followed. Mom, I'm home. Elmira walked out from the kitchen, a smile lighting her face. Aerith, Naruto, welcome back. How was work today? Fantastic, Mom. Aerith beamed. I was able to sell a lot of flowers, and Naruto, I finished my job and watched over Aerith. Naruto said, giving Elmira a meaningful smile. The woman just sighed, knowing that they probably had an encounter with Shinra again. She cared immensely for Aerith, and even though she now had Naruto to watch out for her, it would be in her nature as a mother to be concerned for the well-being of her daughter. With that, Elmira then turned her attention over to Tifa and asked, and who's this beautiful young lady? Mom, this is my friend, Tifa. She's from Sector 7 slums and here to buy flowers. Aerith introduced heartily as she skipped over to Tifa and introduced her, making Elmira smile in response as Tifa greeted her. Nice to meet you, ma'am. Nodding, the eldest Gainsborough said with a pleased smile, my, am I glad to see that my daughter finally has a friend. What do you mean? I'm also her friend. Naruto pouted, while Aerith barely managed to stifle a giggle with Tifa. Yes, but you're also a boy, young man. Elmira said with a motherly glare at the blonde, though the smile never left her face as she continued, I think my daughter will be better having a friend who is also a girl. Right? Naruto acknowledged with his arms crossing over his chest. He could hardly disagree with that kind of logic. So, will you be staying over for dinner? It's kinda late and the next train back to Sector 7 is much later tonight, right? I'd love to, but I don't want to be a bother. Tifa shook her head and said hesitatingly. Don't be ridiculous, dear. You will stay and have dinner with us. Elmira insisted sternly, causing Tifa to laugh before nodding her head at the older Gainsborough. Then it settled. Come on, Tifa. Let me show you around the garden so you can pick out some flowers that you want. With that said, Aerith grabbed a large basket before she led Tifa out of the house with Naruto trailing behind them. As the girls walked through the vibrant garden, admiring the variety of colorful blooms, Naruto slowly made his way to his usual spot and pulled out a kunai. His eyes flicked to the bright orange materia gleaming in the handle as he held the weapon up, recalling what Madame M had told him earlier about a friend of his. If the materia was truly what he believed it to be, then, hey Aerith, what's Naruto doing? Tifa asked, noticing Naruto standing on a mound of grass near the waterfall with his eyes shut and kunai in hand. Aerith turned towards the blonde and tilted her head curiously. Like Tifa, she had no idea what Naruto was doing either, but she could sense some form of energy, similar yet different from the one that he normally used to cast his techniques that he had explained to her was chakra, rushing into a kunai in his hand. Before Aerith could answer the question, the winds began to pick up. The energy Naruto was channeling into his kunai became visible, flickering from his arm, and the weapon he was holding like a golden flame. At the same time, the orange materia began to emit a bright light, so bright that Naruto, Aerith, and Tifa had to shield their eyes with their arms, with the girls holding onto each other for support against the gusts of wind. Naruto, meanwhile, had to use his chakra to keep himself rooted to the ground to keep himself standing, wondering if he had made a mistake. What is this? A familiar voice rang out before Naruto heard the sound of something landing on the ground next to him, making him immediately lower his arm down and open his eyes. Although Naruto hadn't heard his voice in over a month since arriving in Gaia, Naruto could never mistake it to belong to anyone else but his partner, the nine-tailed fox Biju, Kurama himself. Kurama! Naruto shouted, his voice echoing through the flower field. You made it. A summoning. Tifa found herself uttering in amazement. Because of their rarity, she had only heard rumors about them, but they were amongst the most powerful with the power to grant its user power to summon powerful entities to come to their aid in battles, with only a handful of people having them in their possessions. There was even a saying that the summons were sentient beings who would choose their summoners instead of the other way around, unlike other, more common materia. Naruto. The fox Biju acknowledged as he turned his head to the blonde, his eyes widening in realization after he saw their surroundings. Wait, am I outside of you? And why am I so cute? Although it probably wasn't what he had intended to say, Kurama's question was interrupted by Aerith, who let out a delighted squeal as she rushed over and kneeled down next to the mighty Biju to rub at his head. Although Tifa was more reserved in her reaction, it was quite clear she also found Kurama adorable. And he could hardly blame them. Not only was Kurama now the size of a small dog, for some reason, but his orange fur had grown, giving him a fluffier appearance compared to before. 9 long, swiping tails waved around behind him, and his ears still resembled those of a rabbit and a fox with black marks stretching down to his red eyes, but Kurama's forepaws and upper body had become more fox-like, making him look even more like an actual fox with 9 tails than he had been ever before. And indeed, to the girls, he was cute as hell. What's this? Naruto, who's this girl? Kurama demanded while avoiding Aerith, who just laughed and chazzed after him. Aw, come on. Don't be like that. Hey, back off. You can talk. Tifa asked in surprise, with Aerith sharing the same expression when Kurama finally opened his mouth to speak to her, having only been telepathically communicating with Naruto from the moment that he was summoned like they had always done in the past. Naruto. Who are these people? What's going on? The 9-tailed fox continued to ask in confusion as he leaped into the air and landed on Naruto's shoulder, baring his fangs threateningly at Aerith, but the brunette didn't look like she was scared of it in the slightest. A lot has happened since you were trapped as a materia. Naruto said as he held up his kunai and showed Kurama the orange materia that he had summoned him from, making the 9-tailed fox look on in surprise. There's so much for them to talk about. End of Chapter 4. Chapter 5. The Time of Peace. It seems things are much more complicated than I thought. Kurama said while looking up at Naruto as the two of them sat facing each other on the grass mound next to the waterfall of Aerith's garden, with the brunette herself taking a spot next to Naruto and still trying to pet the 9-tailed fox whenever she could, though her hand got slapped away every time by Kurama using one of his tails. Tifa, meanwhile, was helping Elmira prepare dinner in the house, having decided to leave so that Naruto and Aerith could talk to Kurama in private. Naruto thought it would be for the best. Although Aerith and Tifa had become good friends, he didn't want to share his secret of being from another world with someone he didn't know well enough. Although she appeared trustworthy and didn't look like the talkative type, Tifa was also the bartender at a bar in Sector 7 slums where she probably had a drink or two every now and then. If she were to get drunk and unintentionally reveal their secret to someone who worked for Shinra, it would cause major problems for both him and Aerith. On the other hand, Kurama was without a doubt the most peculiar creature that Tifa had ever met, but she seemed to believe him to be a summon that he had called forth from a rare summoning materia. Particularly, she wasn't wrong, and Naruto preferred to keep it at that for the time being. "So, we're stuck here," Kurama continued. His words were not a question, but rather a statement of fact. Naruto had just finished giving him a rundown of their current whereabouts and mostly everything that had been happening to him over the past few weeks. To say that the Bijuu was surprised would be an understatement. "It appears so." Naruto nodded. "Right, but why am I a tiny little fox though?" Kurama asked as he looked down at his forepaws, as if finding them to be offensive. Were you something else before Naruto summoned you from the materia?" Aerith inquired with a finger on her cheek. "Obviously, you clueless girl. I was a giant fearsome beast in my world. I was the size of a mountain, and a swipe of my tail would bring down that giant metal plate above your head like one of your human toys." Kurama explained as he pushed his chest out proudly while Aerith gasped in amazement. "My power was unrivaled. I was feared by many and respected by even more. Being confined to this tiny form is frustrating, to say the least." "Oh, sorry that you ended up like this then, Kurama. Not to mention I used to have hands, not paws." Kurama sighed wistfully, making Aerith reach toward him, slowly at first, and pat him on his back instead of trying to pet his head again. Kurama didn't squat her hand away this time and allowed the girl to continue doing it until she took her hand back herself. "Maybe your size has something to do with the amount of your chakra that I used to summon you?" Naruto asked after giving some thought about the matter. He did use a very small amount of Kurama's chakra that he still had full access to and channeled it into the orange materia to summon him, after figuring that if the orb was really his partner, then the reason he had not been able to make it work had been because he used his own chakra instead of Kurama's chakra. Fortunately, his theory had been correct and it was thanks to Madam M that he had figured that one out. "But we gotta try that later. If you use more chakra to summon me again, I would be able to come out at least a bit bigger than a dog," Kurama said sarcastically before he looked up at Naruto and continued speaking of, "I take that my chakra is still within you?" Naruto nodded, "Yeah. When I summoned you earlier, it was my first time using your chakra since I got here, but I didn't feel like there was any trouble. I thought maybe something happened and I just couldn't hear you anymore." "I see. But I have been healing much slower than before." Naruto continued. "Cuts now take about an hour to fully heal instead of instantly. And when I first arrived here, it took me about 3 whole days to fully recover from my injuries. The doctor who treated me was surprised that I survived the trip to his clinic. And that came from the fact that Naruto had bounced back from way worse and in a shorter time as well, with how strong his healing factor had been. He still healed fast, much faster than possibly any human in Gaia, but the difference was significant enough to make Naruto more cautious when fighting, knowing that sustaining heavy injuries could potentially slow him down, even with his high pain tolerance. Monsters were easy to deal with because most of them were mindless ferals, but Shinra and their forces, especially the Turks, were a completely different matter. As confident as he was in protecting Aerith against them, Naruto would rather not show any weakness and risk it by being careless, something that he tended to do even after years of outgrowing his reckless self because of the war. "I was so shocked to see you waking up just a day later with that kind of injury, you know." Aerith chimed in, making Naruto nod and smile at her. "Maybe it was because my consciousness wasn't there to cling to life, so my chakra responded slower. The whole you die I die situation. I decided to heal you cause I didn't want to die and all." Kurama mused before the two of them shared a chuckle in amusement at the memories of their past relationship, leaving Aerith to tilt her head to the side and gaze at the two in curiosity while wondering the story behind their friendship. "So, anyway, we are stuck here, aren't we?" Kurama asked. "I don't even know how we got here, Kurama. Gotta figure that one out first if we hope to find a way to get back," Naruto said before shrugging his shoulders, smiling a little as he leaned back and put his hands on the grass behind him, with his legs stretching out in a relaxing manner. "But to be honest with you, after a month here this world is actually not that bad." "Not bad, you say?" Kurama asked before glancing over to Aerith to continue. "So, wanna introduce me to this friend of yours? I'm Aerith. That much is obvious. She helped the doctor take care of me when I first got here. She and her mother also let me stay at their place for now." Naruto said with a chuckle before bringing a hand up to scratch the back of his head, trying to figure out the right words to summarize his whole situation with Aerith to Kurama, and long story short, Aerith is the only one here who knows that we are not from this world. However, Naruto wasn't so sure anymore, not after meeting Madame M earlier that day. You told her? Kurama asked, although he couldn't help but feel that it wasn't quite the case. Oh, Naruto didn't tell me. The planet did. Aerith answered with a straight face while waving her hand in front of her, making Kurama stare hard at her, as if the girl had just suddenly grown a second head before glancing over to Naruto to see him nodding his head with a small smile on his face. Sighing, Kurama opened his mouth to speak, but he was stopped by the sudden, audible growling of his stomach. It took both him and Naruto a second to fully process what they had just heard. Oh, you hungry? Aerith asked with a bright smile as she got up on her knees and looked at the orange fox, not noticing that Naruto had sat straight up and was looking at Kurama in a mixture of surprise and wonder. We will be having dinner with Mom and Tifa soon. Would you like to join us, Kurama? Sure. I suppose. Kurama answered unsurely, nodding his head at Aerith before looking at Naruto to see his partner giving him a shrug of the shoulders, looking as skeptical as the nine-tailed fox himself. Getting up, the trio hurriedly made their way back to the house, with Kurama riding on Naruto's shoulder, after he refused to let Aerith carry him in her arms as she had offered, making their ways in just in time to see Tifa and Elmira setting the final dishes onto the table. It was quite clear that the older Gainsborough had gone above and beyond to prepare enough food for everyone, and they all looked incredibly mouth-watering. Oh wow. Naruto commented with a wide grin on his face, while Kurama felt his stomach rumbling once again in anticipation at all the food laid out on the table before them. Keep your hands to yourself, young man. Elmira spoke to Naruto in a stern, motherly tone, before she finally noticed the fox perching on his shoulder and decided to ask. And who's the little guy? Mom, this is Kurama. He's Naruto's friend. Aerith beat Naruto to it before the blonde could even open his mouth to introduce Kurama to Elmira as she skipped to his side, her hand reaching out to pet the orange fox while smiling and giggling excitedly, causing Kurama to grumble under his breath, isn't he just the cutest? Well, hard to disagree. The older Gainsborough smiled as Tifa nodded her head repeatedly in agreement. So, I take that he will join us for dinner. Should I get him? I would like a seat, not a dog bowl, if you don't mind. Kurama said, cutting Elmira off before the woman could finish asking the question, leaving her looking at him with her jaw hanging in surprise, while her eyes darted repeatedly between him and Naruto. You know what? I am not going to ask. Finally, Elmira said with a small sigh as Naruto and Aerith chuckled softly while Tifa just looked on in wonder. They could hardly blame her for reacting like that, having seen Naruto performing feats that not even her daughter, who she knew was etc., was capable of. The talking fox would hardly be the most unusual thing that she had seen associated with Naruto since the day he moved in to live with them. Do you prefer raw or cooked food then? After that, everyone took their seats around the table and enjoyed dinner together, with Kurama leaning over while standing on his hind legs on a pile of books stacked on a chair between Naruto and Aerith, eating in enjoyment the first proper meal of his life from a bowl of food that the latter had prepared for him. It was quite clear to both him and Naruto that whatever transformation or progress that Kurama had undergone when they arrived in Gaia, not only had it altered his appearance to make him look more like a fox, but it had also given him the physical anatomy of one. It seemed he was no longer just a chakra beast like he had been his entire existence, and after the first bowl of food, it seemed to be a welcoming change for the fox. After dinner was done, Tifa and Aerith worked together to clean the dishes with Elmira before joining Naruto for a few rounds of Queen's Blood, a card game that seemed to have gained popularity among the residents of the Sector 5 slums and all around Midgar. Naruto had been playing the game with the children at the Leaf House orphanage, but Aerith seemed to be on a level of her own with these kinds of games, easily beating him and Tifa, no matter what strategies they tried against her. Kurama, meanwhile, settled down on the couch next to his partner, looking as content as a lazy, spoiled cat after a full and delicious meal. Ha! Pay up. Aerith declared with a cheer as she extended her hand out toward Naruto, who narrowed his eyes playfully at her, before handing over his bet money. Not that they bet more than a couple gil for each round, but Aerith looked genuinely happy lightening up his wallet for him. Oh, it's almost 8 o'clock. Tifa gasped softly after glancing at the clock on the wall nearby. I should probably get going now, guys. I will walk you to the train station. Naruto said as he got up, with Aerith following closely behind him. Me too. You guys, you don't have to. I know you can take care of yourself, Tifa, but I can't let you head there alone in the middle of the night like this. It's no trouble at all, I assure you. Naruto insisted as he grabbed his jacket while Aerith handed Tifa the basket of flowers that they had picked together from the garden earlier that afternoon, making her smile softly in response before nodding her head in acceptance. Bidding Elmira farewell after expressing her gratitude to the woman for the amazing dinner, Tifa then set off with Naruto and Aerith, leaving Kurama behind to continue resting on the couch as he chose to do and headed into the night of Sector 5 slums. The trip to the train station was uneventful, but the lively atmosphere that Aerith was able to maintain as she chatted with Tifa about various things made the walk quite enjoyable for everyone, even the bystanders who caught sight of the two beautiful young women. "So Aerith, if you don't mind me asking," Tifa suddenly said as she looked over her shoulder and at Naruto, who continued to follow them, but turned around to talk to a group of children following him, asking if he would come to hang out with them at their secret playground tomorrow. "Yes?" Aerith asked, smiling. "You and Naruto, are you two dating or something?" The Aerith gasped, having not expected Tifa to ask her such a question. She was thankful that there wasn't much light around, or Tifa would have seen that her cheeks were matching the color of her jacket. "Oh, of course not. What makes you think that we are dating?" The ancient spluttered, keeping her voice down so no one but Tifa could hear it. "Oh, when I asked around for you two this morning, everyone told me you should be with him, and I was so surprised when I found out you guys also live together." Tifa answered with a shrug, not to mention that you guys seem pretty close as well. "Well, that's because he's my bodyguard." "Yes, that's right," Aerith answered, mentally patting herself in the back for coming up with such a logical answer in a short amount of time, but all that she got from Tifa in response was a look. "And we live in the same house because he doesn't have anywhere else to stay. Our home just happened to have a spare room, that's all." "I see." Tifa nodded her head finally before lowering her head apologetically to the brunette. "Sorry if I make you uncomfortable, Aerith. I was just curious. Maybe I shouldn't have." "It's okay. Us girls talk about those things all the time, right? I was just surprised to have one myself for the first time, that's all." Aerith shook her head and said with a soft laugh, making Tifa smile at her, before the two broke into a fit of giggles. Looking back at Aerith and Tifa while continuing to walk behind them, Naruto couldn't help but wonder what they were laughing about. "The train will leave in 5 minutes. I better get going then," Tifa said as she made her way back to Aerith and Naruto after purchasing a ticket back to Sector 7 slums. "Thanks again for the flowers, Aerith. I will make sure to take good care of them." "I know that you will, Tifa," the brunette replied as she leaned forward slightly with her hands behind her back. "Say, do you mind if we stop by your bar tomorrow?" "Of course not. You and Naruto are more than welcome at 7th Heaven." Tifa nodded her head with a beaming smile before she turned around to start boarding the train, looking for an empty seat through the windows of the nearest cabins. "See you guys tomorrow then." "See you, Tifa," Naruto and Aerith said as they waved her goodbye to Tifa, watching as the train slowly pulled away from the station before finally disappearing into the night. Smiling, Aerith then turned to Naruto and asked him with a mischievous twinkle in her eye, making the blonde raise an eyebrow at her in wonder. "So, my bodyguard, shall we head back?" Sure," Naruto answered with a soft, amused chuckle, allowing Aerith to link her arms around his as they made their way back home. "Remind me why I let you guys talk me into this again." "Relax, Kurama. No one likes a sulking mascot." "Good." The fox Biju, her summon, said with a light scoff under his breath, making Naruto chuckle as he walked ahead of Aerith out of the elevator of Sector 2 Upper, while pushing the four-wheeled cart he had crafted for her so she could carry more flowers to sell in front of them, with 3 more weeks had passed since he arrived in Midgar. While the cart's design was rather basic, the bottom portion had been painted to resemble the flowers she was selling, while the frame itself was polished to a shine with gleaming silver wheels and could be folded for easy transportation. The best part, however, was the drawing of Kurama that Aerith had sketched with the children at the leaf house on the side of the cart, while the 9-tailed fox himself sat in his own seat at the head of the cart, being the marketing strategy that was thought up by Aerith herself. It had taken a lot of convincing to get Kurama on board, but so far, the strategy had been working spectacularly. The sight of him as a cute little fox never failed to attract a crowd of customers, particularly young adults and children, to the flower cart, giving Aerith the perfect chance to showcase her ware, which had been selling very well. Naruto had even proposed the idea that if people wanted to pet Kurama, they would have to buy a flower, but Aerith had turned it down, claiming that they didn't have to go that far, and not to mention it would also make Kurama more uncomfortable. "Alright, Kurama. Remember to smile," Aerith said with a beaming smile with 2 fingers pushing at the corners of her lips as Naruto stepped back and allowed her to take over the flower cart. The fox just rolled his eyes back at Aerith in response, but he did not move from his position. It was quite clear to Naruto that Kurama just went along with Aerith because she had been using a large sum of money the flower cart had been bringing in with his help to buy him snacks and other delicious treats, which he seemed to be genuinely enjoying. Thus, Aerith began her daily job of selling flowers, pushing the cart around with Kurama sitting inside, while Naruto simply stayed back, watching from a distance while keeping an eye out for any Shinra suit. Since they were in Upper Midgar, Shinra elite troops and enforcers could be seen patrolling the streets in pairs for sign of lawmakers or even the eco-terrorist group of Valence, but it was quite clear that they had been ordered to keep their distance from him and Aerith and only watch them from afar, a task many of them sucked at in term of discretion. Still, as long as they kept to themselves and didn't do anything stupid, Naruto would leave them alone to do their duties. Together, the trio walked down the crowded street of Midgar together, with hundreds of citizens bustling through the traffic-filled walkways. Cars were driving down the brick road, and already several people had noticed Aerith and her beautiful flower cart in the crowded traffic. Naruto remained in the back and allowed Aerith to sell flowers as the hours passed by idly, the sun moving slowly across the sky above them. Kurama occasionally complained about the heat or the noise of the city, but overall seemed quite content sitting in his designated spot on the cart, especially after Aerith had woven some flowers together to make an umbrella for him. You know, I heard the calm was actually right that way. Oh? Naruto blinked, looking at Aerith to see her smiling at him with one hand, pointing at the direction he had been looking at, having just finished selling some flowers to some women who seemed to have been drawn to the cart by Kurama. Naruto did not think much when choosing the place to use as his place of birth on his fake ID, since it didn't really matter, but he had done some research on calm just in case and knew that the place was a small quiet town that was the home to miners who work in the mithril mine before monsters put it out of business. I have always wanted to go there, or at least see it, you know. I heard there was a beautiful grassland that was said to go on forever beyond the town. Aerith continued, trailing off softly as she turned and gazed at the direction. Shinra? Naruto asked, assuming the reason why Aerith had not done so. In a way, yes. Still, I don't think that they will care if I ever decide to go there. Junin is just around the corner. No matter how far I go, I will still be under their radar. Aerith shook her head and explained it to him, making Naruto nod his head in understanding. I guess it's because I don't think I can do it. The whole world bustling with life. My childhood was confined within the steel walls of Shinra HQ, and my subsequent years were spent under their steel sky. Even now, it's hard for me to think that I'm ready for everything that is out there. Before Naruto could say anything, another pair of customers arrived and asked to buy some flowers for Aerith, leaving the blonde to ponder her words by himself. It was a few hours later, when the midday sun was directly above their head, that they decided to stop for lunch. With Elmira being busy that day and could not make lunch boxes for them, Naruto and Aerith decided to head to a local restaurant. After their orders had been placed before them, the two wasted no time to dig in, savoring their lunch in comfortable silence, while Kurama happily gobbled up his own order beside them. The sight of a small fox devouring a bovine rib twice the size of his own body was truly one to behold. This way, Aerith. With a gesture for Aerith to follow him, Naruto exited the restaurant as she followed closely behind, her eyebrows raised in curiosity. They made their way to the small parking lot beside the building and walked until they reached a brand new latest edition black Hardy Daytona motorcycle, the dream of many young men living in the slums. Aerith's surprise was turned to realization as she watched her friend reach his hand into the top left exhaust pipe and retrieve a key that had been cleverly hidden in there. Naruto, this is Aerith said in astonishment as Naruto got onto the bike and slowly backed it out of the parking spot. When did you? I brought it earlier. But you didn't. Aerith trailed off as Kurama leaped onto the bike and examined it from above the headlight. Naruto did leave for the restroom for a few minutes as they arrived at the restaurant, but there was no way that he could have gone to the nearest bike dealership and gotten the bike in that small amount of time. Moreover, Aerith knew the bike cost a fortune, having seen it being advertised on TV recently. There was no chance that Naruto could have made enough to buy one already by Jut being a merc. When was the last time that she saw him not having trouble with money again? If I tell you I can be at two places at the same time, will you believe me? Naruto asked playfully as he got off the bike and brought out his storage scroll to seal away the flower cart, making Aerith stare at him strangely. Chuckling, the blonde then made his way back to his newly bought bike and got back on, smiling at Aerith as he continued, you said you wanted to see calm, right? What are you waiting for then? Hop on. Naruto, Aerith said softly, clutching a fist at her chest as she gazed at the blonde. It wasn't a difficult decision for the brunette as she found herself nodding her head to Naruto without even a moment of hesitation before walking around to take her seat sideways behind him. So, you do know how to drive this thing, right? Aerith asked, looking over his shoulder with her arms encircling his waist. I actually got my driver's license last week, so you are in good hands, milady. Naruto grinned at her before he turned back, inserting the key into the ignition and bringing the powerful engine of the motorcycle to life with a low, guttural growl before he looked up at his partner, asking him. Will you be okay there, Kurama? Just drive, Naruto. Kurama said simply as he sat on the headlight and used the small amount of chakra that he had in him to stick safely to the spot. Smiling, the blonde then revved the engine and smoothly pulled out of the parking lot, with Aerith holding securely onto him, heading down the streets before driving towards the outskirts of Midgar. Reaching the highway a few minutes later, Naruto sped up, allowing the wind to whip their hair while the hot sunlight kept them company. As Midgar slowly disappeared into the distance, Aerith looked around and took in her surroundings. The Mako reactors had left the land surrounding Midgar barren and lifeless, but already she could feel the air becoming fresher, with no Mako reactor and industrial building around to pollute the air. Naruto. Aerith called, her voice breaking the comfortable silence between the two when she heard the sounds of a helicopter. Looking over her shoulder, the brunette turned her gaze up and wasn't surprised to see a helicopter with Shinra logo flying behind them, having caught up to them soon after they had gone beyond the city. It's Izne. She has been following us all morning. Naruto answered, his casual tone assuring Aerith that they were not in any trouble with Shinra. Must have been ordered by her boss to follow us to make sure we are not leaving Midgar for good. Are you sure that's not what they're thinking? Naruto nodded assuredly, yeah. I sent Izne a message telling her I am taking you out to see Calm and the grasslands earlier. Bet she's sitting up there trying to figure out how I got her number. The blonde finished with an amused chuckle, making Aerith giggle softly behind him in response. The journey to Calm was a bit more eventful than they both had anticipated, with the occasional monsters and fiends blocking the road, but Naruto swiftly took care of them using his shuriken, clearing them out to safely drive through the areas. It seemed the presences of fiends grew exponentially the farther they were away from Midgar, even when compared to the slums. Continuous exposure to high concentration of Mako mutated them, but the lack of it also made them extremely aggressive in their hunts for prey. Would you look at that? In the end, it took them about an hour to reach Calm, but Aerith and Naruto chose not to enter the town and instead drove to a nearby hill, where the pair and Kurama were offered the full view of town as well as the land beyond. Leaning back against his bike, Naruto smiled as he looked over to Aerith, who stood next to him with her braids swaying gently in the winds and gazed longingly at the breathtaking scenery of the grasslands before them, a mesmerizing sea of green that seemed to stretch on forever under the bright blue sky, being a stark contrast to the bleak metal and concrete of Midgar that even Naruto had grown accustomed to. Everything is so green. Aerith murmured softly, unable to stop herself from smiling as she turned her head and looked at a flock of avian creatures flying over their head. A living, breathing planet even after all that we have done to it, she trailed off, looking down with a hand clutching at her chest. Before Naruto could say anything to her, Aerith suddenly spun around and flashed him a beautiful smile, so beautiful that Naruto almost overlooked the sadness that flashed through her eyes briefly. Thank you, Naruto. For bringing me here. Naruto returned her smile with a warm one of his own. It was my pleasure, Aerith. He said, watching as Aerith slowly walked back to his side, standing next to him with their shoulders slightly touching and their hands next to each other. It wasn't long, however, for the brunette to lean even closer to him and rest her head on his shoulder, making Naruto smile fondly in response as he turned his attention back to the beautiful landscape before them. Ready? Are you? Naruto grinned as Aerith winked at him and held up her staff, preparing to face the horde of wererits and gorgers that the blonde had been hired to exterminate, having built their nests in an abandoned building between the slums of Sector 4 and 5. Since it was an off day for Aerith, the brunette had decided to tag along with him, helping him hunt the monsters and destroy their nests before they could cause any serious harm to the travelers between the two areas. You want to try that move we practiced yesterday? Naruto suggested, making Aerith nod her head in response before twirling her staff around, building up her magic. Dashing toward the brunette, Naruto slashed at a groger that tried to pounce on her, killing it instantly, before immediately twirling around to throw his kunai at the wererits, just as Aerith swiftly touched the tip of her staff with its blades, empowering it with her magic. The kunai, shrouding in a sparkling pink aura, soared through the air and sliced through the stomach of a wererit, causing it to let out a shriek before collapsing. Instead of embedding into the ground like normal, however, the kunai bounced right off of it like it was made of rubber, with Naruto instantly teleporting to its location, using a second kunai to eliminate 3 more wererits faster than the eye could blink. Before the magic-infused kunai could fly too high into the air, Aerith swung her staff down, causing a magic platform to appear directly in front of the weapon and allow it to bounce back down with seemingly increased speed toward another monster. In a flash of yellow, Naruto appeared at that exact location and killed his target with the weapon in his hand before teleporting away once again, with Aerith repeatedly changing the trajectory of his other kunai with her magic, taking down the monsters one after another in a colorful show of yellow and pink. No monsters could react in time to their combined assault, including the gorgers, as Naruto was too fast for their animalistic nature. The final wererit, which appeared to be the alpha, had scale too thick for the kunai to penetrate through, but Naruto teleported behind it and caught the weapon in his hand as it bounced off to twirl around and slash at the air in front of him, just as Aerith did the same with her staff by swinging it down, the two of them simultaneously unleashing the magic inside their weapons at the monster, which was blown to pieces in the explosion of magic that were created when the two slashes collided. Nice work, Aerith. Naruto praised, making Aerith beam at him as he walked back to her, looking around to check if there was any monster still lurking around. I think that's all of them. We just need to take care of their nests now and we can go to Sector 7. Don't forget about our payment. Naruto chuckled and nodded his head to Aerith as she reminded him. Since she had been helping out, Naruto had been giving a percentage of his payment for the monster hunting jobs to her. He had wanted to make it 50-50, but Aerith insisted on taking only a small sum of gil, just enough to buy Kurama his favorite snacks and the necessities to better take care of her flowers. Using fire materia and ninjutsu, Naruto and Aerith cleared out the nests in the nearby abandoned building, scouting the area carefully to make sure that they did not miss anything before making their exit after the fire had died down, heading back to Sector 5 to receive their payment. The client was a traveling merchant who had been having trouble traveling between the slums due to monsters and fiends, but now that Naruto and Aerith had taken care of them, the man could finally resume his business with much less worry. Bidding the man goodbye with a promise to check out his ware if they ever ran into each other again in the future, Naruto then drove Aerith to Sector 7, weaving through the rundown roads connecting the undercity of Midgar, where Chocobo was always the preferred choice of transportation. Still, as far he was concerned, in under Midgar Chocobo were mostly used to draw carriage, and the only Chocobo rental establishment was in Sector 1 slums, which was inconvenient for how far it was to where they lived and usually traveled. Naruto still remembered how he felt the first time he saw a Chocobo, finding it to be quite cute like Aerith, who had playfully compared his blonde hair to its feathers. However, Kurama didn't share the same sentiment. Meanwhile, Kurama didn't seem to share the same sentiment, claiming that he found the infectious lively atmosphere that it radiated irritating. Arriving at 7th Heaven, Naruto parked his ride near the entrance of the building and let Aerith dismount first before following behind her. Before either of them could start making their way into the building, the door swung open as a dark-skinned man made his way out, halting their advance with his towering figure. His eyes were hidden behind a pair of dark sunglasses, while his attire consisted of a brown vest over a black tank, military green pants, and matching brown boots. The glove that he wore on his left hand had several metal bonds around it, but the other hand was not a hand at all, but a steel minigun, which made him look even more intimidating than he already was with his hulking, muscular figure. "Hey Barrett. Is Tifa in?" Naruto asked the man in a cheery tone, having met and gotten to know the man a couple of weeks ago during one of his many visits to 7th Heaven with Aerith. To say that the man was rough around the edges would be an understatement, but Naruto found him to be a good father who cared deeply for his adopted daughter Marlene, the girl currently sitting on his shoulder and beaming excitedly when she saw Aerith. "Aerith. Hello Marlene." Aerith beamed and waved her hand at the little girl. "Here again. Maybe you two should just consider moving here." Barrett grumbled in his usual gruff voice as he reached up with his left hand and lifted Marlene off his shoulder to gently put her down so she could run to Aerith, who smiled softly as she brought out some flowers and gave it to the beaming girl, making Barrett smile before asking in a much softer tone, which he only used to talk to his daughter, "Don't you have something to say to the kind lady Marlene?" "Thank you Aerith. You're welcome." Aerith giggled. "And if y'all looking for Tifa, she's at her apartment toughening up Biggs and Wedge. Bar is closed for the day." Naruto nodded his head in understanding. Biggs and Wedge, along with a girl named Jessie, were Tifa's closest friends in Sector 7 slums and some of her most regular customers. The trio could often be seen hanging out at the bar with Barrett in the evening. "Thanks Barrett." With that, Naruto and Aerith left 7th Heaven and headed to Stargazer Heights apartment complex where Tifa lived, waving their hands goodbye to Marlene as she went home with her father. Because they had come to the place so many times for Aerith to hang out with Tifa, almost at least 5 to 6 times every week, Naruto and his brunette friend had become a familiar sight in the slums of Sector 7, having many people greeted them along the way as they traveled together on Naruto's bike. Obviously, there were also guys who disliked Naruto for being able to hang out so casually with girls as beautiful as Aerith and Tifa, but they were among the minority that the blondes simply paid no mind to. Not that they would dare to start any trouble with him, not after they had seen what he did to the delinquents who tried to hit on Aerith and get her to ditch him last week. There was no clown in Midgar, but the looks that those guys had after he was done with them could have easily landed them a job as professional clowns, with their colorful hair, funny clothing, and bloody red noses. Searching for candidates. "That weird kid is here again huh?" Naruto asked, looking at a boy who looked to be the age of 15 to 16, who had been hanging out in front of the grocery store of the slums. He had medium-length silver hairstyle with bangs and blue eyes. His sparkling clean bright color clothing made him look oddly out of place, being a uniform of a sort consisting of a white and blue button shirt, a black leather belt, black plaid shorts, tall black socks with suspenders, and brown boots. He also wore a magnification eyepiece, a multicolored orange bow on his right shoulder and a large backpack on his back. "Pretty sure he has started looking at you," Aerith said with a smile as she leaned her head back and looked at the boy as she and Naruto walked past him. "See. He's doing it again." He looks at everyone and says the same thing every time, Aerith. Naruto chuckled before the two continued to head to Stargazer Heights. Upon arrival, they found Tifa standing in the front yard of the building, her fists in front of her as she faced two young men with a smile on her face. One was slim but quite muscular, while the other was a chubby guy wearing a red bandana holding back his black hair. Both men looked like they had seen a better day, sporting bruises on their faces and arms and sweat trickling down their necks. Their shirts were also covered in dirt as they pushed each other, trying to convince their friend to go on ahead against Tifa, while a girl with brown hair pulled back into a ponytail watched them from the apartment building. You go first, Biggs. No way, I already went first last time. You go first, Wedge. Then Tifa will knock them both down in 3 moves. Naruto spoke to Aerith without taking his eyes off the scene before him, making the brunette laugh softly in response. You're on. Come on, guys. You can do it. Jessie cheered from the side, giving the two young men a boost of confidence, while Naruto and Aerith watched from the side. Exchanging a nervous glance, Biggs decided to go first, but Wedge immediately followed suit, running toward Tifa. Before they could even make any move, the bartender swiftly avoided them by diving to the side, at the same time kicking Biggs in his foot, making him lose his balance and fall over. Trying to help his friend recover, Wedge was unable to see Tifa coming at him from the side, grabbing his shirt to flip him around, slamming him into the ground shoulder first, before twirling around with a spinning heel kick, knocking Biggs down when he tried to sneak up on her from behind. Stop looking so smug. You know about this stuff more than I do. Aerith pouted as she brought out 10 gil and gave the money to Naruto, who said nothing and simply held out his hand in front of her in expectation, while a complacent smile plastered across his face. Sticking her tongue out cutely at the blonde, Aerith then turned back and walked toward Tifa, her hand waving enthusiastically in the air as she called out to the young woman who had become her best friend while she was giving some tips to Wedge and Biggs. Hey Tifa. Aerith. Naruto. Hearing her voice being called, Tifa turned her head and gasped softly in pleasant surprise when she saw the pair, her hand unconsciously tucking a strand of her hair behind her left ear when her eyes landed on the grinning blonde who walked up to her with Aerith and offered Biggs his hand to pull the Wedge to his feet before doing the same to his friend. Hey there. When did you guys get here? We actually just got here. Dropped by 7th Heaven earlier and Barrett told us you were here. Aerith answered, waving at Jessie as the girl did the same from her seat while leaning over the railing and flashing Naruto a smile as Wedge and Biggs thanked the blonde for helping them get up. Thanks man. Thanks, Naruto bro. No problem, guys. Naruto answered and immediately continued before Wedge could say anything, all the while smiling in amusement and no Wedge. Today is also not the day I will finally let you borrow my bike and take it out for a joyride. Aw. Wedge let out a sound of disappointment. Wow, you are not even trying to deny that, huh? Biggs asked with a chuckle, patting his friend comfortingly on the shoulder before turning back to Naruto. We are having a party later tonight at 7th Heaven. You and Aerith wanna come hang out with us? Sure. Just let me make sure her mother is not gonna take off my head for bringing her home late first. Naruto grinned while Aerith just rolled her eyes playfully at him before nodding her head to Biggs. Think I might need to go shopping for extra groceries. The bar is running low on stocks anyhow. Tifa pointed out. In that case, can I come with you, Tifa? Aerith said, and we can get Naruto to help us. Oh, good idea. Good luck, man. Before Naruto could even say anything to them, Biggs and Wedge gave him encouraging pats on the shoulders and quickly took off just as Naruto was about to ask if they wanted to tag along, having seen what happened the last time the blonde went shopping with Aerith and Tifa. Not that they would buy anything that was expensive, but with Aerith having a knack for buying cute items and Tifa being not that far off, Naruto often found himself carrying multiple bags and groceries while having to follow them around for hours. Can you guys wait here? I am gonna head up to my room and wash up a bit. Tifa said with a gesture to her room on the 2nd floor of the building, making Aerith nod her head in response. As the brunette hung back with Naruto, Tifa turned on her boots and headed toward the staircase, but she was stopped by Jessie, who had a playful smile on her face as she called out to her. Hey Tifa. Tifa. Can I talk to you for a second? Sure. What's up? Tifa asked, smiling as she walked over to Jessie, who then lowered her voice down to speak with a teasing smile, her hand moving in a hair-tucking gesture to mimic what Tifa had done earlier. I saw what you did there with your hair when Naruto arrived. What do you mean? The bartender asked in surprise, her eyes darting over to the blonde as he talked with Aerith that didn't mean anything. Oh, relax, Tiff. It's not like he hasn't caught the attention of half the girls here in the slums already, while you are someone who gets to spend so much time with him thanks to Aerith. Tifa opened her mouth to speak, wanting to tell Jessie that it wasn't like that between them, but her friend beat her to it. Hey, do we know that he's single or not? I asked Aerith if they were dating. She said no. And when was that? About a month ago. A lot could have happened since then, considering that those two live together, but I think you still have a chance. A chance to do what? Why are you so interested in this, Jessie? Tifa huffed, crossing her arms under her ample bosom as she gave Jessie a look. Are you interested in Naruto too? Oh, trust me, I would love to date a guy like him, Tiff. Handsome, strong, sweet, kinda rich if that bike of his is anything to consider, and can be quite funny too. Jessie answered with a dreamy smile as she rested her head on the palm of her hands, looking at Naruto as he teased Aerith for not being able to balance on his bike while sitting in the driver's seat, but that's the problem. I like guys who have a tough front more, cause it's more fun to break that down to see the big softy inside. Obviously you do. Anyway, Naruto is just a friend, Jessie. I gotta go now. Best not keep them waiting. But that said, Tifa turned around and headed up a staircase, going 2 steps at a time and a little bit too fast for her own liking. By the time that she had reached her room, Tifa immediately opened the door and walked inside, slamming it shut behind her to lean against it and exhale, releasing breath that she didn't know she was holding. A moment later, Tifa emerged from her room to rejoin Naruto and Aerith, and together the three of them traveled to Upper Midgar, since the market in the Sector 7 slums did not exactly have what Tifa needed for her bar. As Aerith and Tifa walked arm in arm down the crowded streets of the city together, moving from shop to shop, supermarket to liquor store, Naruto trailed a close distance behind them, although it didn't take it long for the blonde to find himself carrying multiple grocery bags, some of which contained wine bottles that also needed careful handling. He really should have made more storage scrolls when he had the chance. Ha! Naruto let out a sigh of relief as he collapsed onto a bench under the shade of a large building, feeling more exhausted than he did hunting drakes, some of the more dangerous monsters in the slums. It also didn't help that it was a pretty hot day in Midgar. It was one of the only times having a steel sky above their heads was a benefit for the people of Under Midgar, as it blocked most of the sunlight. Despite that, the blonde couldn't stop himself from smiling, unable to deny that his time in Midgar so far had to be the most peaceful and enjoyable that he had had for a very long time. Naruto, hey. Hearing Aerith calling out to him, Naruto looked up to see her and Tifa standing before him, each holding out an ice cream cone with the same flavor as the one she was holding in her other hand. For Aerith, it was strawberry, while Tifa had vanilla ice cream with chocolate syrup. Want some ice cream? We didn't know what flavor you prefer, so Tifa said, trailing off a bit before asking with a twinkle of hope in her eyes, while Aerith also looked on in anticipation. So, which one do you like? Can I just have both of them anyway? I'm melting here. Naruto asked before reaching both hands out to take the ice cream from their hands, making both girls look at him in surprise. Thanks. Giving them a grateful smile, the blonde then looked down and started eating, as Aerith and Tifa looked at each other before breaking out in a fit of giggles. Smiling, they both turned on their boots and headed to the nearby shops, leaving Naruto to sit there and enjoy the treat contently. Looking around, the blonde wondered where Cisne and the other Turks had been. He hadn't seen any of them in a week, and even on that afternoon, there was no sign of them. Perhaps they had been given a new assignment by their boss, but it was unusual for them not to have at least one member trailing him and Aerith around Midgar. Eating too much sugar is proven to be bad for your teeth. How in the hell are you even here? Naruto said, snapping his head to the side to ask the white-haired kid that he had seen hanging around Sector 7 slums, finding him weird, not just because of the monotone that he used to talk, but also because of the way he turned and looked around. His movements were stiff and they almost felt mechanical. And there's also the fact that Naruto couldn't sense him at all. Sure, he could hear his footsteps, but there's nothing coming out of the boy that made him feel like a living person. Oh, I walked here. He answered regardless. I have been meaning to introduce myself to you. My name is Chadley. Pleased to meet you. Naruto. The blonde introduced himself as he shook hands with the strange boy. What do you want with me then? I am an intern researcher for Shinra's Research and Development Division. I am here hoping that you will be interested in helping me with my research. Naruto opened his mouth to refuse, but Chadley beat him to it by continuing before he could say anything. Rest assured that this research is entirely my own and has nothing to do with Shinra or Professor Ho-Ho, whose efforts I am working actively to undermine. As you are a merc, I will also make it worth your while if you agree to assist me with my work. Really? That's quite generous of you. Naruto said, narrowing his eyes at Chadley. It didn't look like he was lying, and Naruto also knew not all apples were rotten in that bunch called Shinra Electric Power Company. There were honest workers who were just trying to make a living in a city like Midgar. Why though? Who are you exactly? As I have introduced myself to you, I am merely an intern researcher who wishes to know more about the world around him. I wish to become an independent scientist who uses his research for the good of the people instead of Shinra's ambitions. However, as you can see, I am not exactly equipped for fieldworks and have to rely on someone who is capable. But that said, he then reached his hand behind his backpack, his arm bending in an awkward angle, before pulling out a small device that looked like a smartphone, with some buttons on the sides and several camera lenses on the back. This is a prototype access module. Please accept it as a down payment for this job, as well as your tool to fulfill my request, should you agree to assist me with my research. Naruto reached out and took the materia, taking a closer look at it before turning back to Chadley to ask what does it do. The module is connected directly to my personal biological database. It allows you to access all the information and data that I have on local wildlife, monsters and fiends, from their biology to behaviors, which you can use to give yourself an edge in battles against them, should you need it. Chadley explained at the same time, if you encounter new species of monsters or fiends on your job, you can use the device to scan for their biological data, which is also your primary task. Sounds simple enough. Naruto nodded his head in understanding to Chadley before putting the device away into his pocket, seeing no harm in helping Chadley with that kind of work. Alright, Chadley. I will help you. Thank you, Naruto. Please accept this guidebook should you need any assistance with using the module. I wrote it myself. You can also use the device to call me if you have any further inquiries. I will always be available. Chadley said as he took out a small notebook and handed it to Naruto. Now if you excuse me, I have to return to Shinra now before Professor Ho-Ho starts questioning my prolonged absence. An incident in his lab a week ago has been keeping him occupied, but he will start asking questions if I don't return soon. However, rest assured that he will never know of this meeting between us. Good. See you then. With that, Chadley left, disappearing into a crowd of people crossing the street as he headed toward the direction of Shinra building, leaving Naruto behind to sit on the bench and check out the guide while finishing his ice creams, while wondering if the incident in Ho-Ho's lab had anything to do with the absence of Cisne and the Turks. As he checked out Chadley's guidebook, Naruto could see that along with all the typical information about how to operate his module, there were also detailed instructions on how to disassemble and reassemble the device without causing it any damage should Naruto ever feel the need to check if there was any listening or tracking device, which was actually what Naruto intended to do later. It was quite clear that Chadley had planned ahead so that he could enforce the trust between them. Naruto, you coming? Coming. Naruto shouted back when he heard Aerith call out to him, quickly eating the cone of the vanilla ice cream before dusting his hand to pick up the bags to stand up, making his way over to the girls as they waited for him. So, where to next? I still need to buy some bread, so the bakery should be our next stop. Tifa answered him after checking her note. Before we go, Tifa and I have something for you. Aerith said with a smile, reaching her hand into the bag she was carrying to bring out a keychain with a small orange fox charm. It's a gift. Looks a lot like Kurama, doesn't it? It really does. Naruto nodded his head with a small laugh and accepted the keychain, taking out the key of his bike to attach it to. Thanks, Aerith. Tifa. You're welcome. Both girls said at the same time while beaming radiantly. By the time that they returned to the slums of Sector 7, the sun had already started to set, casting a warm orange glow over the undercity of Midgar. Stepping out of the train, Naruto followed Aerith and Tifa as they made their way out of the train station together, listening to their conversation about the menu for the party that night. Aerith knew how to cool, but her skills paled in comparison to Tifa Lockhart, whose recipes were said to be famous even to the people outside of Midgar. Oh, I would kill for that meat stew of yours, Tifa. That might be even better than my mom's. Aerith said with a dreamy smile before she leaned forward and whispered into her friend's ear, and I think Naruto loves it too. Is that so? Tifa's face lit up when she heard that. I will make plenty for you two tonight then, Aerith. Good thing that we bought so much. Tifa was just about to finish telling Aerith another idea for the menu when something caught her eye, causing her to stop in her tracks, with her eyes widening in surprise. Aerith and Naruto looked at her curiously before turning their gazes towards the direction she was looking, seeing a blonde-haired man clad in a black outfit with shoulder pads sitting on the ground with his back leaning against the wall of just outside the station, looking to have passed out from exhaustion. While it wasn't uncommon to see people sleeping on the streets of the slums, the man differed from the usual bunch, with a massive sword lying on the ground next to him. Cloud. Tifa blurted out, before hurriedly running over to him, with Naruto and Aerith immediately following. Moving ahead of Tifa, Naruto put the bags in his hands down and lowered himself down on one knee to check for his pulse, making him whimper weakly in response. His face was covered in dirt, and overall he had the look of someone who had been wandering around for days. He's fine. I think he's just tired and malnourished. Naruto said before looking over to Tifa to ask her, as she breathed out a sigh in relief. You know him? Nodding, the bartender then gave Naruto her answer. Yeah, but this is my first time seeing him in years. His name is Cloud Strife. We came from the same hometown before he left to join Soldier. Even more reason for us to help him. Can we bring him back to your bar, Tifa? Aerith asked, and Tifa nodded her head in confirmation. I will carry him. You girls took care of those bags. Naruto said as he helped Cloud sit up a little, throwing one of his arms on his shoulder before standing up, grabbing his sword along the way to carry it along with them. When he felt Cloud stir against him, Naruto looked over to the fellow blonde and said with an assuring tone, "You're gonna be alright, man. Just hang on." Reunion. Naruto heard Cloud murmuring under his breath as he carried him through the streets of Sector 7 slums, feeling confused as he pieced together what Cloud just said. Slowly, the other blonde opened his eyes, but didn't give any more response than that as he allowed Naruto to carry him to 7-7, with Tifa and Era following behind them. Without the shreddest doubt, those were the eyes of a soldier. End of chapter 5. What if Naruto was sent to Final Fantasy? Thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.